Chapter 669, Shen Technique. Shen Technique. A term that was so ancient that people had almost forgot it. A term that had suddenly come into Dai Tao's mind. His face immediately turned pale white. The black crow's dark red eyes flashed with eerie light. They seemed to be looking down from on high, their expressions indifferent as though they were gazing at ants. The moment Dai Tao met the eyes of the black crows, his mind turned completely blank. A desolate, cold, and vast presence came at him. His mind was actually stolen for a moment. Suo Mo's expression was focused and his eyes completely void of emotion. This was the first time he was using a Shen technique and it took all of the Shen power in his body. From the beginning, he knew that the 10-crow celestial domain would not be an actual threat to Fanshu Shouja. He was counting on the Shen technique. The Shen techniques that had been lost by the passage of time had astounding power. Compared to the complex and exquisite methods of the three major systems at this time, Shen techniques could be called simple. But this word simple only applied to Suo Mo now that he had finally set foot into the doorway to Shen power. Before he had comprehended the great PSMO steel, he had never successfully completed a Shen technique. But after comprehending it, the manipulation of Shen power came naturally. The ancient Shen techniques were simple and ancient but held great power. Even in this era where cultivation was so developed, it was enough for the top Shouja to feel jealousy. The power of Shen techniques originated from Shen power. Suo Mo had two Shen power inheritances. One was the Greenvine tribe's inheritance that Qing Lin had given him. The other was the Sun tribe's Shen power inheritance. Suo Mo had studied the Shen power inheritance of the Sun tribe. The 10-crow celestial domain and the Sun Shen power could be used together. After the fight against Marshal Yu, Suo Mo had spent a lot of effort to merge Shen power into the transformations of his 10-crow celestial domain. With his present amount of Shen power, he could not use Shen power to fight a full battle like the totems in the ancient era. Even using the most elementary Shen techniques, the Shen power inside him would be quickly used up. For the present Suo Mo, the Shen techniques were his trump card. Ji Zheng hadn't thought that Suo Mo would use a killing move immediately. Because when one looked at the situation, Ji Zheng was the one at a disadvantage. However, after the fight against Marshal Yu, Suo Mo understood the great gap between him and Fanshu or marshals. If it hadn't been for the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed acting up during that fight, he definitely did not qualify to fight against Marshal Yu. He had advanced greatly in the period of time since, but there was still a large gap between him and a Fanshu, much less Fanshu like Ji Zheng who had been at this level for so many years. Suo Mo had judged his own abilities correctly from the start. His strategy was effective. Shen technique, Crow Eye. The legend said in the ancient Sun tribe, what they liked to raise the most were black fire crows with red eyes. These fire crows were vicious and wary, and when they flew, it was like an arrow. Their wings would cut the air causing a high-pitched and piercing sound. The sound acted as an alarm for the tribe. The 10 black crows in the air suddenly spread their wings and the light in their dark red eyes brightened. An extremely dissonant sound pierced the eardrums and penetrated people's heads. Under the strange piercing sound, the Ling power around him uncontrollably froze for a moment. Ji Zheng's expression on that golden face finally changed. After entering Fanshu, the Ling power inside his body had become one with him and he had rid himself of all mortal thoughts. His Dhyana heart was clear and open without any distractions. He had almost reached the limit of Dhyana cultivation. Even if he was swarmed by 10,000 ghosts and had to enter the cycle of rebirth, the Ling power inside his body would not separate at all from his physical body and mind. In such a case, how could his Ling power go out of control? While Ji Zheng's mind was stunned, the 10 black crows in the air suddenly flapped their wings and dove down at Ji Zheng. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Balls of dark red flames suddenly appeared from their toes and quickly covered their bodies. The 3 slender golden feathers on their foreheads dropped off and floated around them. The 10 dark red streams of light were like 10 arrowheads pointing directly at Ji Zheng. Shen technique. Ji Zheng's pupils suddenly contracted. When he realized what this was, the 10 flows of dark red light almost reached him. The eerie dark red of the black crow's eyes captured people's minds and caused a chill to run through their minds. A feeling of danger that almost consumed him caused every thread of Ling power in Ji Zheng's body to respond unconsciously. The power of a Fanshu finally was shown at the moment of death. The mortal thought beads, that had been hanging from Ji Zheng's neck exploded. Grey mist fell down towards the 10 dark red streams of fire. At this moment of life and death, Ji Zheng did not hesitate to sacrifice the treasure he had forged through many decades. When the first flowing fire black crow blurred into the grey mist, it seemed to land in a bog and its speed quickly decreased. Pew pew pew. The 10 crows all entered the grey mist. When the grey mist came into contact with the flames around the crows, it was like adding cold water to boiling oil and exploded. Pia pia pia. The force from the rattle and pops, like that of fireworks, rushed towards people so quickly they couldn't breathe. The grey mist immediately disappeared. Ji Zheng's expression was grave but without any pain. His eyes were bright as his hands moved. In a moment, he went from the angrily glaring Vajrapani to a venerable one holding a flower. His brow was gentle, his smile as warm as the spring wind. The murderousness immediately dissipated. The lotus flower in his hand was tender and beautiful. Petals fell off the flower and floated towards those fast-approaching black crows. But these seemingly slow flower petals managed to stop these black crows. At this time, the cool moon essence that had been motionless, as if it had been waiting, broke free of the heavily damaged grey mist without any warning and shot at Ji Zheng. This came in a flash. The slowly revolving sea of sutra characters around Ji Zheng suddenly formed a wave of sutra characters that stopped this cool moon essence. Almost at the same time, a light flashed through Tsing Lianer's eyes. Under the crescent moon, her long sleeves danced. Pia, the moon essence that had been stopped by the sutra characters suddenly exploded. The cool moon essence started from within the sutra character sea and spread at a rapid rate. In a moment, the sutra character sea was covered in frost. Moon frost essence. Shen technique. Another Shen technique. Ji Zheng's heart jumped and his expression changed again. How was it possible? How was it possible? When Zuoyamo had cast his Shen technique, Ji Zheng had been shocked but was able to face it calmly. But when he discovered that Tsing Lianer could also use Shen techniques, he was completely stunned. How was it possible? While the 4 great sects were still trying to recover Shen power, there were 2 people here that were able to use Shen techniques. What he didn't know was that Tsing Lianer's Shen power inheritance was more complete than Zuomo's. After restoring the most important part, Tsing Lianer's moon Shen power inheritance was complete. She also had cultivated Shen techniques. His mind became unfocused. Ji Zheng showed a weakness. The frost was like a poison that infected the sutra characters. All of the sutra characters were destroyed and became countless cool moon energies. The sutra si kasaya, that Ji Zheng wore also dimmed. It became as grey as withered leaves and slowly crumbled. In an instant, 2 8th-grade treasures were lost but Ji Zheng could not attend to them. At this crucial moment, a 5-colored treasure wheel appeared and managed to stop the moon frost. On the treasure wheel, 5 colors cycled endlessly as it stopped the frost essence. This was Dai Tao coming to the rescue in time. 8th-grade talisman, 5-element manifestation wheel. This talisman had been originally crafted when Dai Tao had still been a roaming xiu. After he entered Xian Kong Temple, he studied the sutras and reforged it. The treasure wheels had 5 colors that belonged to the 5 elements. There was a different venerable one within each of the elements. The 5-element manifestation wheel stopped the frost essence. The 5 elements circulated and dissipated the power of the moon frost. Ji Zheng relaxed slightly. If they could endure the enemy's attack, they could take back the initiative. He had never expected that they could cultivate Shin techniques. Caught off guard, he had been unprepared. But now, countless records flashed across his mind. Shin techniques were dominant, but they also require great expenditure of Shin power. The other would not have the endurance. Wait. An eerie shadow suddenly flashed across Ji Jing's mind. He was alarmed. There was one other person. Not good. Suddenly, a strange power silently entered his body from his back. Ji Jing's expression changed. Dai Tao's expression also changed. A Gui appeared behind Ji Jing like a ghost. Purple energy was visible on her right palm as she pressed it to his back. From the beginning, when a Gui had disappeared, she had not appeared until now. Only appearing to deliver a fatal attack. Ji Jing's body shook and the golden color on his face faded at a visible rate. At this time, the flower petals stopping the black crow burned up and turned to ash. There were 3 black crows left. Red light flashed through the 3 black crows. They turned into 3 streams of light that accurately hit Ji Jing, who had lost the protection of the Sutra Sea. Ji Jing's body abruptly started to burn. No one noticed that the 9 slender golden feathers around the black crows entered Ji Jing's body like needles. Shi Xiang. Dai Tao frantically shouted. After the successful attack, Zhou Mo did not linger and shouted, "Run!" Before he finished, a hand appeared behind his neck. A Gui had appeared like a ghost behind him and grabbed his neck. He felt his eyes blur and then found someone beside him. Tsing Lianer was grabbed by the neck like he was by a Gui's other hand. Tsing Lianer's face was slightly pale. Using that Shin technique had taken all of her power. The two smiled at each other. Detecting the sincerity in Zhou Mo's smile, an emotion that was not there in the past, Tsing Lianer felt happier. Boom! An intimidating Ling power vibration came from behind them. Shocked, Zhou Mo turned to look back. A faint Buddha figure that was hundreds of zhang tall appeared where they had been. The authoritative Buddha glittered with golden light. A vast Ling power vibration caused Zhou Mo's expression to change drastically. That Buddha figure stared at Zhou Mo with an indifferent gaze. Zhou Mo felt his heart seize. Suddenly, a Gui increased in speed. The purple energy flashed and Zhou Mo finally felt the pressure decrease. Ji Jing was covered by the Buddha figure. The golden feathers that had entered his body were forced out and turned to powder. The Buddha's figure also disappeared. Ji Jing's complexion was pale. Looking at the rock that had shattered into multiple pieces and lost all light, after having been unaffected by losing so many other talismans, he finally showed pain for the first time. The ultimate treasure of Xian Kong Temple, Buddha relic, had saved his life. He suddenly raised his head and said to Dai Tao, "Do not give chase." Dai Tao was shocked. While Jijing Shixiang was injured, the enemy had no power to fight back. Even if he was alone, he could capture the 3. Jijing said coolly, "The Shin power that last woman cultivates is famed." Chapter 670, 26 years ago a Gui was extremely fast. But what surprised Zhou Mo was that the 2 old thieving bandits did not chase after them. The last attack by the Buddha manifestation had scared little Mo Gu to the point his little heart stopped beating. It had also killed the little bit of hope that he felt. If they managed to kill one, then escaping would be much easier. Even when Zhou Mo thought of it now, their attacks had been flawless. No matter if it was individual performance or their teamwork, it was the best they could do. But that cold-faced old thieving Baldy was so powerful it almost surpassed the imagination, and he was even harder to deal with than Marshal Yu. The 3 of them were much stronger than when they had fought Marshal Yu. He and Tsing Lianer had both used a Shin technique, and a Gui's ambush had been wondrous. But even so, the 3 of them working together could not finish off the cold-faced old thieving Baldy. The old thieving Baldy's great talismans were much more powerful than Marshal Yu's. The great wealth of Xian Kong Temple could be seen. Zhuemo had become used to seeing the dominance that came with incontestable power. But this battle reminded Zhuemo of the importance of talismans. Thinking about the endless chase that would be coming, Zhuemo decided. Wasn't it just competing with riches? While we aren't as wealthy as Xian Kong Temple, we are not poor. He started to search his ring. Zhuemo had to say after digging around that he did have a lot of good things. The broken arrow from the Archer tribe, the fragments of Eastern Water tribe's treasure, Heaven's summoning bell, the Nether Ghost core of the Nether Ghost tribe, the golden leaf, the jade hook tree, the yin-yang null polarity bead, the corpse sea bamboo, the tears of the mist people, the blackheart treasure coins, the green carp tongue sword. Zhuemo's confidence increased and he immediately felt his spine straighten. The spring wind blew, the battle drums beat, who's afraid of whose talismans? Having found a safe place, Ague stopped fleeing. Zhuemo carefully set up Jinji and hid their traces. The three began meditating to recover their energy. 4 hours later, Zhuemo was the first to recover. His right hand could constantly provide Shen power. At this time, the small amount of Shen power it provided greatly increased his recovery speed. After a while, Ague and Lianer also opened their eyes. Zhuemo took out all kinds of materials, talismans, and mo weapons, and arranged them in rows. See what can be used, pick what you want. Lianer's exquisite face showed shock. The ground was covered in materials, talismans, and mo weapons that all gave off different lights. It dazzled the eyes. The cave's walls reflected rainbow light. Ague grabbed the Nether Ghost core and the corpse sea bamboo. Zhuemo was slightly shocked. He hadn't thought that Ague would pick these two. Even Qing Lin hadn't known how to use the Nether Ghost core. The corpse sea bamboo was an extremely dark talisman. Lianer was not polite and picked the green carp tongue sword and some blood thunder beads. The blood thunder beads had been taken from Wu Ye's personal items and there were 16 beads. Unlike the Xiuzhe who would usually possess all kinds of talismans, Mo would usually only have 1 or 2 Mo weapons. But when Zhuemo saw the blood thunder beads, his eyes lit up. He reached out a hand. Give me a blood thunder bead. Lianer handed a blood thunder bead as he requested. The blood thunder bead was about the size of a thumb, the color of wine red, its surface reflective but the bead was translucent. A line of silver slowly curving over the surface of the bead as though it was alive and gave people a feeling of extreme evilness. Feeling the blood thunder bead in his hand, Zhuemo managed to discern the general method to make these beads. In the extremely yin blood pools, plant thunder plasma, after 5 years, blood thunder beads would be produced. It was not easy to obtain blood thunder beads and they were extremely valuable. General level Mo would do almost anything to obtain a few to use as life-saving measures. Some of the content from the Yin Fire Bead chapter floated into Zhuemo's mind. His thoughts shifted, his hand flipped, and a thread of fire appeared in the middle of his palm. The sun Shen fire immediately wrapped around the blood thunder bead. Zhuemo's hands moved and all kinds of spells flowed into the fire. Moments later, the new blood thunder bead flew into Zhuemo's hand. The new bead was slightly smaller than before, the silver line was even brighter, and there were dots of gold energy on the bead. Let's call this bead the Gold Star Silver Thread Bead. Zhuemo threw the bead over to Lianer and then focused on reforging the other 15 blood thunder beads. The Yin Fire Bead chapter was a method that Zhuemo had gotten from Puyao a long time ago, and was extremely familiar with the contents. As a Xiuzhe, he was skilled in forging. After his time in the 10-finger prison, he became skilled in Yao arts. His pure 10-crow celestial apparatus was enough for him to dominate in body cultivation. He was also skilled in Mo matrices. Without realizing it, Zhuemo could be said to be learned in the methods of all 3 territories. Even though his strength could not enter the ranks in the three fields, Swa Mo could definitely be called a freak in terms of how many different things he learned. What Swa Mo did wouldn't be permitted in large sections. People had limited energy and time, so if what they learned was varied and unfocused, it would be hard to accomplish anything in the future. Due to this, after sect disciples went through the initial recruitment tests, the sect would send experienced elders to give them suggestions which area to focus on. From then on, the disciple would focus on only one field. How could Zhuemo learn so many tricks? The two old spirits each wanted to pull him into their own camps. If he hadn't stumbled onto Shen power, Zhuemo would truly have been lost in the heterogeneous mix of skills. The three major systems were each unto themselves, with thousands of methods, and each with their own wonders. But Zhuemo managed to obtain the Shen power inheritance. He comprehended the Shen power. The three powers started to merge and he ended up with new Shen power. A new system formed like this. This caused Zhuemo to look at the heterogeneous mix of content from a higher level and merge them into a single system. So when Zhuemo saw the Blood Thunder bead, he thought of the Yin Fire bead chapter. If this was any other person, they would have probably pondered for a long time about how to use Yao forging methods to forge Mo beads. But Zhuemo didn't hesitate at all. He felt this was natural and there were no obstacles. From very early on, his understanding of cultivation had been diverted far from the orthodox. The Yin Fire bead chapter naturally had its own uniqueness in order to have been famed for a time. The Yin Fire beads that Zhuemo had forged before had become something he kept up his sleeve. But under Zhuemo's present understanding and unorthodox methods, this spell that had passed from thousands of years ago was completely transformed. If the great mind that created the Yin Fire bead chapter knew that his spell was changed into something strange like this, he would probably cry from under the ground and climb back up. For someone that only thought of practical benefits like Zhuemo, tradition was nothing. As long as the gold star silver thread bead was powerful enough, then it was enough. After forging the 15 gold star silver thread bead, Zhuemo looked towards the talismans and Mo weapons covering the ground. Agui and Singlianer had both picked a few things, but what should he pick? The broken arrow of the archer tribe? That was a good item. The Archer tribe had been a powerful tribe that was able to threaten the dominant Sun tribe. This broken arrow wasn't ordinary. The golden leaf also had methods of using Shen power to make items, but after pondering it for a moment, Zhuemo gave up. The reason was simple: he did not have enough Shen power. With his pitifully small amount of Shen power, it was delusion to think he could melt and reforge a treasure like the broken arrow. Another item with the same problem was the 3,000 threads of worry. While Zhuemo had pulled it into his body and they could be said to have listened to his orders, but Zhuemo could not do a thing at the moment. Ever since the anti-dragon claw became a bracelet, the 3,000 threads of worry seemed to have entered a deep sleep. No matter how Zhuemo called to it, there was no response. Little Mo Gu cried inside. After fighting for thousands of years, did you fall in love? The jade hook wood was a 6th grade item and it required just a bit of nurturing before it could turn into the celestial green jade hook wood. If this was a normal time, 6th grade was definitely a good item, but it would not be enough to face Fanshu. The yin-yang null polarity bead's drawback was that the user would die after using it. It was something to use to die along with the enemy. After looking around, Zhuemo's gaze finally ended on the black-hearted treasure coins. The Blackheart treasure coins, one of the 108 Earth Mo weapons. They could become their own domain where yin and yang were reversed, and the 5 elements were mixed. For any other person, it was a top Mo weapon. But for Zhuemo, who had the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed, he was not satisfied with the power of the Blackheart treasure coins. But what if he reforge it? When this thought appeared, it could not be erased. In this moment, Zhuemo made a decision: do it. At most, this subpar weapon would be ruined. The rich little Mo Gu folded his legs and started to fiddle. Xian Kong Temple. The sect leader's harmonious face was dark. The entire hall had a suffocating atmosphere. The elders looked at each other and knew that something bad had probably happened. Everyone should already know about the fight with Xiao Mo Gu, the sect leader slowly drawled. The elders were silent and nodded. Some with nimbler minds felt their hearts jump. Had Jiangzhe lost? This upcoming battle is not insignificant. We have asked Elder Ji Zheng and Elder Dai Tao to go into the Mo territories to bring back Xiao Mo Ge's head. When these words were spoken, the elders were shocked. They hadn't thought that the sect would be so heavy in their action. Two Fanshu elders, this battle was as good as finished. After the shock, all of them showed joy. The sect leader's expression returned to normal. Seeing the joy on the people's faces, he said coolly, Elder Ji Zheng was injured fighting with Xiao Mo Gu. The words were like lightning on a clear day. The entire place was silent and everyone was stunned. Elder Ji Zheng was wounded. Does everyone still remember the events of 26 years ago? Suddenly, the sect leader seemed to speak of something completely unrelated. 26 years ago. Suddenly, multiple elders changed expression. The one that wounded Elder Ji Zheng was the little girl from back then, the sect leader said indifferently. This stirred memories for many people, and even more changed expression. Has she achieved? An elder couldn't help but ask with slight terror on his face. She wounded Elder Ji Zheng, the sect leader said coolly. The elders became silent again and the terror on their faces increased. Elder, no matter if it is this fight, or against the little girl, we cannot lose. The sect leader's half-lidded eyes brightened and that harmonious and kind face became twisted. What slipped from our hands in the past, this time, we have to take it back. Everyone thought of the past events. Their terrified faces suddenly became excited. No matter what we have to do, we cannot lose this time. We cannot give anyone else a chance. The sect leader stood up with heat in his eyes. Victory or defeat, it will all be decided in this one move. The elders had excited expressions, their gazes burning and greedy. They stood and responded in unison, by the sect leader's orders. All of Xian Kong Temple was filled with killing intent. Chapter 671, Creation of the Talisman. Bihan's eyes were dry and burned like fire. They had sprinted for 10 days at top speed. Not drinking and eating during this time, and not resting for more than 4 hours a day, his body was pushed to its limits but his mind was unbelievably excited. Zhuo Mo's actions had been very successful. The Mo had continued to join them in the hopes of participating in this battle against the Shuzhe. But those that were most useful to Gongsun Cha and Bihan were those Mo that were familiar with Cold Mountain Jie. They had lived in the area for a long time and were familiar with the terrain like the back of their hands. Especially the guide with him right now, someone who had told them of this secret and hidden path. This path traversed caverns hidden deep within the earth, 10 li below the surface. There were countless caverns that spanned tens of thousands of li and were interconnected like spiderwebs. They were filled with dark and cold energy, earth fire, beasts, and were extremely dangerous. If someone unfamiliar with the tunnels ventured into them, then they would most likely become lost and die in there. But their risk was worth it. Hidden deep within the caverns was a chaos rift unknown to the majority of people, one that led to an underground cavern in Cold Mountain Jie. Bihan and Gongsun Cha both understood the value of this hidden path. They had deep admiration for what Zhuo Mo had done. What had originally seemed to just be propaganda and was carried out without any technique had increased the chance of their victory. Cold Mountain Jie was the Mo Jie that Jiangzhe had first conquered and right now functioned as the central forward base for Xian Kong Temple's invasion. There were large amounts of supplies stored there, but most importantly was the chaos rift that led to Xian Kong Temple. Gongye Xiaorong's fortunes had immediately changed when Mu Shi closed the chaos rift that led to Xian Kong Temple, leaving Gongye Xiaorong a homeless dog. The chaos rift was of the utmost importance. especially when one was attacking deep into the Mo territories. If the Chaos Rift was lost, it meant losing their path home. Compared to Gongye Xiaorong's prideful actions, Jiang Zhe was more cautious. How could he ignore such an important place? He had set up layers of seal formations at the Jie rivers of Cold Mountain Jie and made Cold Mountain Jie impenetrable. Before this revelation, Gongsun Cha and Bihan had never considered of attacking Cold Mountain Jie. With the small amount of forces they had, the best choice was to search for openings as they moved. Trying to attack such a well-fortified position was the same as seeking death. Gongye Xiaorong had had so many people, but facing Ma Fan, who only defended and did not strike out from his base, Gongye Xiaorong couldn't do a thing and left in defeat. Any battalion wouldn't have any good ways to deal with a fort that was sealed off and had complete defensive seal formations. Presented with such a good chance, if they could not grab it, then Gongsun Cha was not Gongsun Cha, and Bihan was not Bihan. Originally, the two had planned for Bihan to attract Jiang Zhe's attention while Gongsun Cha sneaked to Cold Mountain Jie, but after discussion, they decided that this fatal blow would be delivered by Bihan. One reason was because of the hate between Bihan and Xian Kong Temple, another was that Bihan knew more about the battle generals of Xian Kong Temple than Gongsun Cha. Bihan knew how strong Jiang Zhe was. He warned Gongsun Cha that they could not change how fast they were traveling. Jiang Zhe was extremely perceptive. If Gongsun Cha delayed the movement of the troops, Jiang Zhe would definitely detect it. Gongsun Cha kept a steady pace as Bihan suggested. On Bihan's side, they moved at full speed. Even Bihan felt exhausted down to his bones after advancing at a forced march for so long. But when he thought of the hardship he had endured under Xian Kong Temple over the years, and the state of the wooden and unresponsive Sin Battalion members, his exhausted body was revitalized and the thoughts supported him to keep advancing. "It's this cavern," the guide said joyfully. He was extremely excited. He felt his entire body was tremble at the thought of being able to participate in this battle and deal the decisive blow. "Go!" Bihan spat out with a heated expression. The guide looked with respect at Bihan. In order to not attract any attention, they did not use Mo steeds. After marching for a few days, his endurance had all been used up. Sin Battalion had carried him for the rest of the trip. This battalion was like Mo puppets. They did not know exhaustion, too scary. But when he thought of the battle that was coming, he couldn't help but feel his spirits rise. He led Bihan's Sin Battalion through winding twists and turns as they quickly disappeared into the rift in the valley. Slicing through the air. Any Mo that saw Xiao Mo Guess Battalion would think these 4 words. The organized battle formation and the almost tangible killing energy left deep impressions on people. Especially when this battalion was moving at full speed, the hums and shrills when they moved caused people's scalps to prickle. When this terrifying battalion started to accelerate, the flood of sound immediately informed people that this battle that was watched by the world would start at any moment. No faction along the way delayed them. They were silently watching and waiting for this battle to begin. Jiang Zhe looked at the information the scout had sent and sighed lightly. They have come so fast. In Jiang Zhe's view, this was because Bihan had detected their intentions to delay them. Advancing at full speed was to not allow Jiang Zhe enough time to prepare. But Jiang Zhe was not nervous. He had already finished his preparations. These additional preparations were just to increase their chance of victory against Bihan. But in a battle against someone like Bihan, there were too many uncontrollable factors. These preparations might not be used. He was only repairing the opening in their defenses. They had taken over many of the Mo Jie and Bihan had many targets to choose from. He knew that his fellow disciples that were guarding the other Jie were not Bihan's match. Of the entire defense line, only he could stop Bihan. That was also his strategy. He would face Bihan and leave Gongsun Cha to the others of his sect. If he could stop Bihan, the others could work together to take down Gongsun Cha and then turn around to surround Sin Battalion. Jiang Zhe knew of Bihan's temper. Bihan definitely would not give up a chance to face him. Suddenly, a golden paper crane flew into his hand. Jiang Zhe's heart jumped. The golden paper crane represented the most urgent order of the sect. Had something happened in the sect? He opened the paper crane and read the lines inside. His brow furrowed. When he saw the name of Ji Zhen Shishuzu, Jiang Zhe's surprise could not be suppressed, and it was as though a tsunami formed inside of him. 2 Fanshu experts, and now another batch of experts were about to enter Cold Mountain Jie. What had happened? But Jiang Zhe also had a bad feeling. For any sect, it was dangerous for all of their elite forces to leave the sect and not leave anyone for defense. While he did not believe that anyone would dare to act against the sect, but he innately resisted a risky action like this that did not leave any room to spare. But he was not the sect leader. He smiled helplessly and tried to explain to himself, if it isn't an extremely important matter, the sect leader would not be so impulsive. But Zhuo Mo's expression was solemn. The black heart treasure coins in his hand were completely transformed. The black heart treasure coins had square openings that seemed to be filled with blood. It would be more accurate to call them the red heart treasure coins now. The 7 red heart treasure coins were scattered on a turtle shell. Originally, Zhuo Mo had not thought of this turtle shell that had been thrown into a corner of his ring. When he had been reforging the black heart treasure coins, he had felt that the talisman's abilities were wondrous, but they lacked the power to deal a fatal blow. Zhuo Mo looked down on the black heart treasure coin for this weakness. Since he was going to reforge it, he naturally had to take the chance, so he searched for suitable materials in the ring. When his gaze landed on this turtle shell, his eyes lit up. The turtle shell gave off extremely weak Shen power vibrations. This was something Zhuo Mo had previously had a hard time detecting, but now Zhuo Mo immediately detected the extraordinary nature of the turtle shell. The thread of Shen power was extremely weak, but it was pure. After thinking for a while, he remembered that he had gotten this turtle shell when he had been looting the Sun Shen temple. He hurriedly went to the gold leaf to search for the origins of this turtle shell and was given a fright. This was the turtle shell that the Sun Crystal tribe used for divination during ceremonies. It had been the turtle shell of the Sea Turtle tribe's totem. After the Sun tribe had destroyed the Sea Turtle tribe and their totem, this turtle shell had been given to the Shen temple. The only damage on it were scorch marks caused by the Shen fire of the sacrificial altar. Even though tens of thousands of years had passed, this turtle shell was otherwise undamaged. The Sea Turtle tribe cultivated water-type Shen power, and after being forged in Shen fire for countless years, the Sun Shen power had permeated every bit of it. Water and fire had merged together in an unique fashion. If he could have seen this strange method of fire and water together, Zhuo Mo's Li Water Sword scripture would have advanced several grades. Each treasure coin was now blue with red on the inside, each textured with the pattern of the turtle shell. They dotted the turtle shell. The scorch marks on the turtle shell had disappeared, and the shell itself had become as white as jade without any flaw. Inside the turtle shell was a shallow puddle of crystal clear water that was like a mirror. The tears of the mist people had been used here. What was most unique was that there was a ring of sparks around each turtle coin. They were a miniaturized version of the reversed stellar revolution. Each of the turtle coins had a ring of sparks that revolved prettily on the surface of the turtle shell. This was the first top-tier talisman that Zhuo Mo had gained. It was not suitable to categorize this talisman using the normal grade ranking system. With the Earth Mo weapon as the starting point, the holy relic of an ancient tribe as the foundation, with Yao arts used as adornment, with the mist people's tears as the lake, and forged using the forging methods of the Shouja. A talisman like this surpassed everything that Zhuo Mo knew. The moment that the talisman took form, Zhuo Mo felt joyed. At this time, black cloud gathered overhead and lightning flashed. Lightning struck down and the mountain above Zhuo Mo's head turned to powder. Another bolt of lightning came at Zhuo Mo. A turtle coin suddenly flew from the water on top of Zhuo Mo's head. A suction force suddenly came from the red square hole. The lightning immediately entered the square hole. The turtle coin did not move at all, as though the lightning had just been an illusion. The black clouds overhead seemed to be infuriated. Lightning roared and came down towards the turtle coin above Zhuomo's head. As the thunder roared, the tortoiseshell patterns on the turtle shell slowly turned silver. They were absorbing the lightning. Ancestral Shirshu, most likely of several generations. Chapter 672, Return and Kill. Jijing opened his eyes. His pale face had finally recovered some color. The power of the Lingdan circulated in his body. He had not wasted these few days of rest. However, he knew that the injury would not heal in this little time. The destructive ability of the Shen techniques surpassed his imagination. Even when he thought of it now, he felt a thread of fear. If it wasn't for the Buddha relic, it was very likely he would have died. Shen power, as expected of Shen power. The events of the past suddenly floated into his mind. He couldn't help but sigh lightly. But his Diana heart was strong and knew of the importance of this information to the sect, so the stray thoughts disappeared. He turned and asked Hui Bao, "Can we catch them?" Hui Bao said cautiously, "This one will try." The fight from 10 days ago had frightened him half to death. He had not thought the Fanshu level Shishizu would be wounded. The power of the enemy was this unimaginable. He did not understand why such a powerful expert would still spend time and effort on learning unorthodox skills like concealment and fleeing. Jijing knew that Hui Bao did not have a full grasp of the situation and did not lecture him. He nodded. "Try your best." After the elders of the sect came, even if Xiao Mo Gu could run to the ends of the world, they would have ways of finding him. At this time, the black clouds that were gathering in the distance disturbed them. Someone is forging talismans. Dai Tao looked at the inky black clouds in the distance and the dancing lightning with shock. Such a powerful presence meant that this talisman would be extraordinary. Jijing raised his head to look. "It's them." Having fought against Cui Mo, Jijing immediately detected that familiar presence. The direction where the black clouds were gathering was the same as where Xiao Mo Gu and the others had fled. "This guy is so daring." Dai Tao showed anger. He hadn't thought that Xiao Mo Gu hadn't just stayed rather than fled, and even had the gall to forge talismans near them. So daring. So daring. Dai Tao was so angry he was trembling. It was the first time he had seen someone so arrogant. He didn't even try to flee when being chased by 2 Fanshu and was publicly forging talismans nearby. Talismans. Under the pressure of absolute power, even the top talismans were of no use, much less talismans that were forged in a hurry. In his eyes, this was Xiao Mo Gu underestimating them. Dai Tao turned to look at Jijing. Jijing could see the Dai Tao's fury. His face was still as unaffected as granite. "Let's go see." Dai Tao flew off first without another word. Jijing did not speak and followed closely behind. The two were wary of the trio but not afraid. In their view, Xiao Mo Gu and his group were able to wound Jijing was just because the two of them had been careless. If they were serious, Xiao Mo Gu's group wouldn't have had any chance at all. Dai Tao held a low opinion of Jijing, requesting more support from the sect. He did not think that Xiao Mo Gu could escape from their hands. Jijing was wounded, but Dai Tao, who thought that he had seen what Xiao Mo Gu's group could do, he did not fear them. If it wasn't that this was a great matter. Dai Tao actually did not want to attract too much attention. He was in Fanshu, but he wasn't from Xian Kong Temple. The people in the sect could have their own thoughts about him. But, Xiao Mo Gu's dismissive attitude completely infuriated him. If little Mo Gu knew Dai Tao's thoughts, he would feel he was unjustly blamed. When the last bolt of lightning entered the turtle coin, the clouds in the sky dissipated. The blue sky was clear and was left without any of the killing energy from just moments ago. The turtle coin flew back into the pond. The 7 turtle coins floated and moved on the surface of the water, creating sparks. Having seen the shocking forging process, Tsing Lianer looked curiously at the turtle coin talisman in Zhuomo's hand and asked, "What talisman is this?" Zhuomo remembered that he hadn't given it a name. After some thought, he decided. "Oh, it's called the Little Mo Treasure Cup." He did not have to expend any effort to give such a simple and descriptive name. It could also satisfy his little sense of pride. Tsing Lianer's surprise and anticipation was completely destroyed by this name. Neither Zhuomo or Tsing Lianer would think of how much amazement, Xiao Mo Treasure Cup, would cause the world. Few people would ever learn of this name, its true name of Little Mo Treasure Cup. The cheerful Zhuomo did not know that the name he had just given the talisman would be changed by people in the future. At this time, he was filled with joy and confidence. While he had not tested the power of the Little Mo Treasure Cup, he knew it would be extraordinary. However, the feeling of being connected to Little Mo Treasure Cup caused him to think of Lil Pagoda and lowered his mood. But he quickly sorted out his emotions. "Let's go back and kill them." Zhuomo raised his head and said something frightening. A Gui naturally would not object, but unexpectedly, Tsing Lianer did not object. The cunning and clever little Mo Gu naturally would not seek his own death. He had his own plans. While he had not seen the result of the battle that day, seeing that the enemy had not made a move these past few days, Zhuomo immediately realized that Ji Zheng was wounded, and it was not a light injury. Otherwise, they would not have remained silent in these last 10 days. Ji Zheng's injury caused Zhuomo's thoughts to become active. The 3 of them had recovered, and a powerful talisman had been forged. It could be called their strongest moment. The enemy was at their weakest, and this was a good chance. While the result of the battle 10 days ago was caused by the other underestimating them, it also showed that the 3 of them had a chance. Zhuomo knew as time went on and Ji Zheng's wounds healed, their situation would turn for the worse. If they retaliated now, while it was risky, there was also an opportunity. A Gui would listen to Zhuomo, and Tsing Lianer did not object, so the 3 turned back towards Ji Zheng to kill. But after they had flown out only a short distance, they saw Dai Tao's group. Dai Tao's eyes were keen. When he saw the trio, he first froze and then became furious. If he had felt that Xiao Mo Gu had dismissed them by forging talismans rather than fleeing, then Dai Tao was so angry he could only smile as he saw Xiao Mo Gu had returned. When had Fanshu Xiuzhe been underestimated so? Without another word, he sped up and shot towards the trio. He was going to make the 3 understand the anger of a Fanshu could burn anything. The 5-element manifestation will came out. Xian Kong Temple is still like this. They would make a fuss over any little matter. Xue Dong's tone was slightly mocking. In this time, Xian Kong Temple had attracted the gaze of the entire Xiuzhe world. The battle between Xiao Mo Gu and Jiang Zhe was also watched in the Xiuzhe world. However, what Xue Dong was talking about was not that. Kunlun spies were high in the ranks, and Xian Kong Temple did not intend to conceal the matter, so Kunlun had received the information quickly. "I know a bit about this." Lin Qian felt slightly heavy. He had previously reviewed the cases of ancient tribe descendants being exterminated in the last few hundred years, and knew more than Xue Dong. Xue Dong turned in curiosity. Lin Qian was about to speak when a disciple sudden came in. "Eldest Xixiang, the sect leader is looking for you." Xue Dong immediately understood that the matter was not as simple as he thought. Lin Qian nodded at Xue Dong before leaving with this disciple. When he stepped into the large hall, Lin Qian stopped breathing. Inside the large hall, almost all the sect elders were present. Even the elders that had not shown themselves for many years were in attendance. It was the first time Lin Qian had seen a scene like this in his lifetime. The gazes of the elders landed on Lin Qian's person as he entered. Many elders gave small smiles of acknowledgement. Lin Qian was humble, talented, and well-liked by the elders. Everyone understood the next sect leader would definitely be Lin Qian. These elders had great status, but their descendants and disciples would need to rely on Lin Qian's care. No one was willing to be at odds with Lin Qian. The sect leader seemed to know that Lin Qian had arrived, though his eyes were closed. His strong eyebrows twitched and he opened his eyes. He said slowly, "Everyone knows the situation. I have called everyone here to discuss Kunlun's sect's stance on this issue." The sect leader's authority in Kunlun was unquestionable. In front of the sect leader, those rebellious elders didn't dare to breathe loudly. Moments later, an elder started the discussion. "In the past, our reputation was left in disgrace and we didn't obtain a thing. Our development of Shen power has been pretty good, and if we spend some more time, we will definitely learn some mysteries of Shen power." An elder objected at this time. "Shen power has developed, but it is not something we can complete in a day. Right now, we are searching blindly and only have limited examples. If we can obtain..." The two were like sparks that were thrown into a barrel of dynamite. The hall descended into noise. The sect leader kept his eyes down and half-lidded. He allowed everyone to argue as though he had fallen asleep. Gradually, the camps between the crowd became clear. The majority of elders supported interfering in Xian Kong Temple's affair. Seeing the clear attitudes, they closed their mouths. The hall became silent again. Only after the group finished did the sect leader seem to wake up and open his eyes. He said coolly, "Since you have reached a consensus, then do this. However, we cannot copy Xian Kong Temple. We will only send one Fanshu elder, and 5 Yuanying elders. It would be good to bring along more disciples. If young people do not get experience, they cannot become accomplished." By the sect leader's order. The elders bowed. The way the sect leader handled the discussion and made a decision today had broadened Lin Qian's vision. The sect leader had only said 2 sentences today, but no one was able to object. Lin Qian seemed to understand. After the meeting ended, the sect leader did not find Lin Qian for a private discussion. It looked like a minor meeting, but Lin Qian had learned a lot. A sect leader needed to unite the benefits of the majority and not use his status to force others. Having just walked out, Lin Qian saw a person hurry over. Lin Qian stopped walking. The incomer was the Vice Hall Master Zhong Bao of Listening Wind Hall. He definitely had news. Listening Wind Hall was the intelligence division of Kunlun. It held a reputation and status in the Shuzhou world as one of the best intelligence groups. The number of tentacles it had in all areas of the 3 territories far surpassed people's imaginations. "What is it?" Lin Qian asked. Zhong Bao respectfully reported, "It is about Wei Sheng." Wei Sheng. Lin Qian's eyes flickered. A figure that was as determined and steely as a sword appeared in his mind. His eyes brightened. Chapter 673, Do Not Touch. Tsing Lianer was the first to act against the quick 5-element manifestation wheel. With one toss, she threw out 3 gold star silver thread beads. The thumb-sized golden star silver thread beads transformed into balls of blood when they left her hand. The sticky blood twisted as it flew through the air, and a strong tang of blood immediately filled the area. Inside each ball of blood, there was blood-colored lightning that floated and flickered and little golden flame lotuses. Dai Tai snorted coldly and his eyes became more murderous. In his eyes, he wouldn't need any power to deal with a few blood thunder beads. Diana spells were the natural bane of blood-type MO skills. While Dai Tao was not a traditionally trained Xian Kong Temple disciple, but he had been with the temple very long and almost all the temple records in the were available to him. How could he not know Diana spells? He chanted solemnly as his hands moved to activate a Diana spell. The shadowy figure of a Buddha flew out of the 5-element manifestation wheel and took form. She was dressed in white robes, a red mole between her brows, and held a willow branch. As she descended, her feet landed on a white lotus. She smiled and lifted the willow branch in her hand. Several drops of dew from the willow branch flew into a ball of blood. The blood ball roiled violently like a furious wild beast and continued flying forward. Dai Tao was slightly shocked. It had not been defeated. The white Buddha raised the willow branch in her hand again. Several more drops of dew flowed along the tender branch and shot off towards the balls of blood. Boom boom boom. The balls of blood hadn't dissolved like Dai Tao had expected, instead the 3 balls of blood in the air exploded. Caught off guard, Dai Tao was immediately swallowed by the bloody mist. Boom boom boom. The lightning balls that floated inside the wave of blood flew towards Dai Tao like sharks that had smelled blood. The lightning balls exploded in the air and formed an electrical net that went to envelope him. Those nondescript little golden flames were masked by the blinding light of the lightning. The fast beating of thunder in the blood mist sounded like fireworks. Dai Tao was left extremely disheveled. But lightning of this degree was unable to harm him. But the sheer amount of plasma lightning had surprised him. He hurriedly moved the 5-element manifestation wheel and released a light that covered him. While the lightning caused the light shield to shake, it was unable to cause him actual harm. Such an embarrassment. Dai Tao's face was flushed red. A Fanshu was forced to such a degree by a general level, such a humiliation. And the other hadn't even used Shen power. The angry Dai Tao directed the white-robed Buddha to deflect the lightning. Counterattack. He had to retaliate. He decided that he would not hold back and immediately use a killing move, not giving them any chance at all. Yet Dai Tao did not notice those hidden little lotus flowers of flame until the flowers of fire had actually burned through the light shield cast by the 5-element manifestation wheel. Dai Tao's expression froze on his face. How was it possible? The 5-element manifestation wheel was an 8th-grade talisman. What kind of fire was this? Gritting his teeth, the 5-element manifestation wheel above Dai Tao's head moved again. A dignifiedly figure of a Buddha appeared, this time they were sitting on a red lotus. The red lotus Buddha pointed, and all of the gold flames flew towards the red lotus under him like birds returning to the nest. In a blink, the red lotus was covered in the gold flames. Such a malicious flame. Dai Tao immediately discovered that these gold flames were difficult to absorb. His red lotus Buddha had the ability to absorb all kinds of fire, but this time, it was unable to absorb the gold flames. Was this Shen fire? When the thought appeared in his mind, his pupils contracted. These silent gold flames should be Shen fire. Dai Tao felt as though he was going to go crazy soon. The 2 Buddhas summoned by the 5-element manifestation wheel were unable to defeat the other's blood thunder beads. The enemy was more difficult to handle than he had imagined. Dai Tao calmed down after encountering such a hindrance. It seemed that Jijing Shixiang's injury had not been an accident. These 3 were stronger than he had expected. If he was careless, he might actually lose. He held his hand up into the air. The 5-element manifestation wheel slowly spun, and under the 5-colored light, the flames and lightning lights suddenly stilled. The 5-colored light flowed, the flames and lightning immediately divided, 1 into 2, 2 into 4. They became smaller and smaller until they shattered and disappeared. Zuemo had not hoped that he could defeat Dai Tao with 3 gold star silver thread beads. While Dai Tao was still feeling troubled by the Sun Shen fire, the second wave of attack by the trio arrived. The second to attack was a Gui. Purple energy flashed through her eyes and she slammed her hand towards Dai Tao. At this time, the 5-colored light of the 5-element manifestation wheel was covering Dai Tao. The 5-colored lights moved constantly. A Gui's blow which never missed was deflected and brushed against the 5-colored pillar of light. It shot off and entered the ground below Dai Tao, silently creating a 10-zhang hole. Dai Tao's expression was calm, but he was astounded inside. While a Gui's blow had been deflected, his 5-element manifestation realm still shook. At this time, he did not dare to be careless. His five-element manifestation wheel was being pushed to its limits. Within the five-colored pillar of light, 5 Buddhas of different colors gradually appeared and slowly moved with the pillar of light. The trio felt a strong suction force come from the five-element manifestation wheel. A sticky power was furiously pulling them towards the five-colored light. The air seemed to become solidified and the three seemed to be trapped in a bog. When a Fanshu Xiuzha attacked at full power, the trio immediately felt the pressure increase, pressure that came from all directions and was unable to be blocked. That time they had fought Ji Zheng. Ji Zheng had been the reactive party the entire time and was suppressed by the three. Ji Zheng's attention had been focused on how to resolve the three's attacks. But Dai Tao had rapidly calmed down from his rage and attacked at full power. The three immediately felt the difference. Terrifying pressure came from all directions and caused them to feel it was inescapable. Absolute power. Zhuemo quickly reacted and knew that this could not continue. The power in the air around them was increasing. If they did not act, in the end, just the twisting power in the air would tear them to pieces. Taking a deep breath, Zhuemo brought out the little Mo treasure cup. His expression was solemn, and when he was about to attempt to activate it, the Shen power inside his body suddenly flooded uncontrollably into the little Mo treasure cup. Zhuemo's mind went blank from surprise. Ding! A turtle coin on the shell suddenly became bright. It jumped off the water's surface, turned into a silver light, and flew towards Dai Tao's figure inside the five-colored pillar of light. Good attack. Dai Tao's hairs suddenly stood on end. Without even thinking, he shouted and channeled the Ling power in his body to its limits. The five-element manifestation wheel above his head suddenly accelerated in its rotation. The space within 10 li of this place started to twist. The Buddhas within the pillar were all chanting, each took up different positions and expressions, glaring angrily, smiling, dignified, or solemn. Numerous bright sutra characters floated on the surface of the pillar of light. The silver light was like a silver arrow. The silver arrow did not seem to be affected by the twisting of space. In the moment it touched the surface of the pillar, all of the sutra characters turned bright. The 5 Buddhas acted at the same time and singing rang out over the land. Yet this silver light seemed to have shot into glass. Cling! The clear sound was unusually dissonant when heard with the Buddhist song. The song suddenly stopped. The silver light that entered the pillar seemed to have entered sticky glue and drastically slowed down. Dai Tao finally saw that this silver light was a treasure coin that was round on the outside, and square on the inside, covered in silver etchings. Sparks would come out of the treasure coin and then extinguish within the pillar of light. Strange. Dai Tao's expression changed. The sparks were being destroyed, but the pillar of light from the five-element manifestation wheel was also dimming. At this time, the clear water inside the cup that Zhuemo held shook slightly and it rippled. As the ripple traveled through the air, it caused the five-colored pillar of light rippled as though it was water. The Buddhas within the pillar of light wavered and showed signs of instability. Dai Tao's heart jumped. In an instant, the ripples had caused their positions to be reversed. What kind of talisman was this? A hint of terror flashed through Dai Tao's eyes. Ji Zheng, who had been at the back, changed expression. Not good. If terror rose in Dai Tao's mind, it would disrupt his dhyana heart, and would create a weakness in the pillar of light. Ji Zheng had not thought that the power of these three would have increased so much in just 10 days. He finally realized that they had still underestimated the three. Ji Zheng disregarded the wounds on his body. A gold color rose on his face. His fingers flickered and pointed towards the turtle coin in the pillar of light. Boom! This minute action caused a great thunderous sound. Dhyana sound thunder finger. Yet the moment a weakness appeared in Dai Tao's mind, the turtle coin in the pillar of light disappeared. Dai Tao's right arm suddenly exploded. The bright lightning immediately covered Dai Tao. Almost at the same time that the terrifying power brushed against Dai Tao's body, it had collided with a nearby mountain peak. The little mountain exploded. Suemo woke up from his stupor. The Shen power inside his body had all been wrung out. He suddenly thought of an object and shoved a sun seed into his mouth. Immediately, the pure and burning Shen power turned into a flow into his body. Suemo was overjoyed. The sun fruit seed was as powerful as expected. He was about to activate the little Mo treasure cup when his expression changed drastically and he shouted, "Run!" The three were in sync, and before he finished shouting, Ague and Lianer had retreated dozens of zhang. "I will kill you! I will kill you!" Dai Tao shouted madly. What came from behind them was a tsunami of terrifying Ling power vibrations. Rocks and rivers floated up into the air, leaving gravity and ground behind. Suemo sprinted as he glanced back. Dai Tai's entire body was burnt black and gave off black smoke. His hair was loose and his right shoulder was a mangled mess of blood and flesh. But at this time, Dai Tai's eyes were full of murderousness. He raised his left hand. Astounding Ling power continued to gather towards his left hand. The terrifying Ling power vibrations were like a wall of wind. The terrifying power that induced hopelessness continued to gather. Suemo's scalp felt numb. He hated that he didn't have two more legs. All the power he had, including his Shen power, was used to flee for his life. Ague and Lianer also recognized the danger and furiously flew forward. Suemo flew so hard that his tendons bulged and his face was twisted. The behind of a Fanshu should not be touched. Should not be touched. Chapter 674, Wei Sheng's Sword Oath, Shitty. Ji Jing's shout was like spring thunder. He used a secret Xian Kong temple technique, Nirvana shout. Ji Jing had seen something was not right. Dai Tao was not originally from Xian Kong Temple and his foundation was much weaker compared to Ji Zheng. His Diana heart was not as stable, and if Ji Zheng had allowed him to lose control any further, his mind would be damaged. It would definitely cause a permanent weakness and he would have greater difficulty progressing in his cultivation in the future. The enraged Dai Tao's figure suddenly stilled. His bloodshot eyes recovered some clarity. Moments later, Dai Tao became completely calm and the blood in his eyes retreated. "Many thanks, Shi Xiang," Dai Tao said gratefully. If he had fallen to his mental demon then it would cause great trouble in the future. Ji Zheng shook his head. "We are of the same sect, there's no need to be polite." His gaze turned in the direction the three had disappeared into. His tone was unprecedentedly grave. "These three are powerful and each of them is almost comparable to a Fanshu. They work together well, are cunning, and also have a great treasure. They will not be easy to deal with." Dai Tao felt fear. That talisman Xiao Mo Gu had was very powerful. My 5-element manifestation will could not stop it at all. That turtle coin had passed through his body, disappeared into the distance, and returned to the treasure cup. Dai Tao was an unlucky one. With his history as a roaming Xiu, his 5-element manifestation wheel was based in the 5 elements. If he had encountered another talisman, it would definitely not have been this unfavorable. The 7 turtle coins had been made using the Blackheart treasure coins, which already had the ability to reverse yin-yang and the 5 elements and was a bane of the 5-element manifestation wheel, a natural counter. Ji Jing nodded. "It really is a great treasure." Dai Tao grimaced. "Our boat upturned in shallow water this time. We have been pushed so far by these 3 younger ones." Ji Jing did not feel anything and said solemnly, "It is just the strength of Shen power. I have gained some understanding of Shen power after fighting these few days." Dai Tao paused and then he pondered it. He said, "After Shi Xiang mentioned this, I feel that Shen power is not as incomprehensible as before but I still lacks understanding about several key parts. If we can solve them, then it will naturally come." Dai Tao's tone was slightly excited. The fight these past days had allowed him to experience the power of Shen power. It was stronger than Ling power. Those that could enter Fanshu were all extremely intelligent. The four great sects had studied Shen power for thousands of years, and they had accumulated far more than what normal sect disciples could imagine. After fighting with Mo several times, both had begun to grasp a few things. Their low morale suddenly rose. If they could comprehend Shen power, any price was worth it. They had spent a long time at the Fanshu level and every bit of progression was difficult. If they could comprehend Shen power, their strength would skyrocket. There was nothing more attractive than this. But we are both wounded and our power is hampered. Ji Jing's tone was calm. Dai Tao gritted, those three are too cunning. However, after all the sect elders arrive, they won't be able to escape. There may not be enough time. A hint of worry flashed across Ji Zheng's eyes. Why does Shixiang say this? Dai Tao stilled. The effects of that past incident was significant and the other three sects will not ignore this incident, Ji Zheng said gravely. I'm afraid that their people have already started to move. Then. Dai Tao was astounded. If the other three also came in, the situation would immediately become complex. We cannot wait for the sect elders, Ji Zheng said decisively. Even if our cultivations will be affected, we cannot let these three escape. Dai Tao thought for a moment and then suddenly said, I have an idea. Seeing Ji Zheng turn to look at him, Dai Tao said, these three are troublesome, but if we are careful, they will not be able to injure us. Dai Tao's words were right. Ji Zheng did not speak and waited for his next words. What we want is just the method of Shen power cultivation. If that's the case, then why don't we spar with them? Dai Tao said what he thought. Spar. Ji Zheng stilled. Every day we challenge them to battle, do not aim to win or lose. Using fighting to comprehend Shen power and comprehend it before the other sects arrive. That way, even if our sect is not the winner in the end, we will already understand the mysteries of Shen power. Dai Tao had an excited expression. When he thought about comprehending Shen power, his heart burned hotter. Ji Zheng was silent for a moment before raising his head. Good. Dai Tao's suggestion was plausible. The two were both people that were extremely confident in themselves. They were confident they could comprehend Shen power. The two exchanged a look and chased in the direction that Mo and the others had disappeared in. Almost all the people of the Mo territories were interested in the Zui's Mo battle that was about to occur. The attention that Wei Xing received was reduced compared to before. However, Wei Xing seemed to not have heard the news. He still cultivated diligently every day and in his spare time, he would continue to challenge Mo experts. While the Mo did not like Wei Xing and everyone wanted a Mo expert to tear him to pieces, he was not harassed in any way. Wei Xing used his sword to win the respect of Mo. In the eyes of Mo, only a honest victory would be a victory against such an honorable and respected opponent. Many businesses even came forward. They were willing to provide Wei Xing with the best rooms and the best food. Every place that Wei Xing stayed would quickly become famous. This was all about Mabe. If little Mo Gu was here, he would definitely take the chance to make it rich. Was it so easy to win eldest Shixiang's patronage? There should be a few auctions so that he could wring out every last Mabe. Of course, Wei Xing did not have such entrepreneurial abilities. In truth, if it was not for the convenience, he would have rather stayed in the empty and vast mountain valleys. The evening came. There was a challenge in 3 days. His opponent was a famed expert in this jia. Wei Xing was meditating with his legs folded up in the lotus position, the black sword by his side. There was no joy or sorrow on his face. He almost never relaxed. Almost every drip and drop of time was used on his cultivation as though he was a diligent Diana Shio. Suddenly, Wei Xing opened his eyes in the dark. Since you have come, why hide? Wei Xing said coolly. As expected of brother Wei Xing that even eldest Shixiang praises. A figure appeared in a ripple from the space in front of Wei Xing. The newcomer was a woman dressed in silk and feathers. Her eyes were bright, her teeth white, but Wei Xing's gaze landed on a little row of swords at her waist. Wei Xing's gaze focused. Kuan Luan. The female bowed. Kuan Lun's de Ling Feng greets brother Wei Xing. Brother Wei Xing is peerless in courage, and this female admires you for entering the Mo territories and winning. Wei Xing's expression became normal. Why has Mr. come to see me? There was a small smile on de Ling Feng's face. Your sect is related to the fall of Bright Wave Jie. Brother Wei, please come with me to explain the misunderstanding. Bright Wave Jie had fallen. Wei Xing's heart shook, but after all the fighting in this recent while, his sword heart had become even stronger. There was no expression on his face. Oh, you should speak to the sect leader regarding matters of the sect. Why did Mr. come so far to ask Wei? When he said this, Wei Xing realized, his eyes lit up and became as sharp as a sword. He looked directly at de Ling Feng. Are the sect leader and the Shishu no longer present? De Ling Feng shook her head. This female does not know of that. Brother Wei will naturally know when you return to the sect with me. Wei Xing was not as cunning as Sui Mo, but he was not stupid. He was not sure about Wukong's sword sect, but in a few seconds, he had completely understood why de Ling Feng was here. There was only one possibility when Kuan Luan would come to the Mo territories to invite him back. The sect had split from Kuan Luan. Thinking about what de Ling Feng had just said, Bright Wave Jie had fallen, was it? Sect leader, Shibua, Shishu, they most likely. Wei Xing's body shook. A wave of sorrow and grief rose. His eyes immediately turned red. What did their sect have to do with the fall of Bright Wave Jie? These words gave off a thick scent of conspiracy. Kuan Lun's enmity was evident. Wei Xing understood that de Ling Feng had not come to invite him but capture him. Wei Xing slowly stood. His reddened eyes stared at de Ling Feng. His voice was hoarse as he said, emphasizing each word. If my sect's elders met misfortune because of Kuan Luan, then I, Wei Xing, swear by the sword to destroy Kuan Luan. The great sorrow mixed with hatred hit de Ling Feng's mind like a hammer. De Ling Feng's presence was stolen, her face paled, and she reflexively took a step back. But she immediately reacted and raged. Wei Xing, you dare to slight my Kuan Luan. It seems that you have been secretly colluding with the Yao. Colluding with the Yao Mo. That was Kuan Lun's excuse. Wei Xing's sorrow increased. De Ling Feng's eyes were dismissive as she said proudly, my Kuan Luan is a righteous and good sect, is it one that a lowly fighter like you can slander? Humph. Don't think that because you can show off in the Mo territories that you can challenge my Kuan Luan. Today, I will let you see why my Kuan Luan. De Ling Feng's words suddenly stopped. Because the edge of Wei Xing's sword was against her throat. While she was speaking, Wei Xing's void sword essence had permeated the entire room. Every inch of space was under the control of his void sword essence. De Ling Feng's body was paralyzed and her face was ashen. There was only one thought in her mind. He actually attacked her. He dared to actually attack. He dared to attack Kuan Luan. The iciness and brutality of the black sword caused her hairs to stand on end and fear to move. I usually do not like to fight women. Wei Xing's deep voice echoed in the room. De Ling Feng relaxed slightly. A hand suddenly removed the row of little swords at her waist. For people like you to use the sword, it is a humiliation to the sword. The bone-aching coldness at her neck disappeared. De Ling Feng relaxed. Before she could speak, an extremely thin sword essence burrowed into her body. This sword essence was extremely strange. Once it entered her body, it disappeared. Her face suddenly turned white. Her Ling power seemed to have suddenly disappeared. Her mind blanked. Her cultivation had been destroyed. Return and tell Lin Qian that I will come find him. In the darkness, the Ling Feng could not see Wei Xing's face, but every one of Wei Xing's words were clear on her mind as though they were carved by his sword. The Ling Feng stumbled into the darkness. In the room, Wei Xing gripped the black sword until his fingers turned white. The tears could not be suppressed and continued to flow. Chapter 675, Disheveled. Zhua Mo felt it was strange. The two old thieving baldies kept coming to challenge. No, they were Fanshu experts. You could not use the term challenge for fights with little fish like Zhua Mo. The two old thieving baldies became glue and would not let them rest. They would fight 3 to 5 rounds every day. It was as though Zhua Mo owed them obey. Zhua Mo did not know what these two old thieving baldies intended, but this was also to his own aims. His goal was to lure the two old thieving baldies away to create opportunities for Gongsun Cha and Bihan. Zhua Mo had been worried that these two would not fall for it and return to help Jiangzhe. Since they wanted to fight, then he would oblige. The more he fought, the stranger Zhua Mo felt. He found free time and went into the sea of consciousness to as Pu Yao. They want to use you to comprehend Shen power. With how cunning Pu Yao was, he saw the two's intentions with a glance. Zhua Mo finally realized and then laughed darkly. Little Mo Gu didn't just know Shen power. Of the trio, only a Gui was limited to Shen power. Zhua Mo and Xing Lianer both knew Mo skills, and if this was any other time, they would not dare to use Mo skills to face the two Fanshu thieving baldies. However, at present, the enemy was wounded and their power was reduced. They could manage it. For a greedy person like Little Mo, that would wring out benefits even when there weren't any. Little Mo Gu wouldn't be Little Mo Gu if he didn't take advantage of those that came to him. Heavenly, where would he go to find two Fanshu to spar with him for free? If he pass on such a good opportunity, he would be struck by lightning. Therefore, Ji Zheng and Dai Tao quickly found that the number of times Xiao Mo Gu came to challenge them increased. The two were overjoyed. Of the trio, Xiao Mo Gu's Shen power was the strongest and the purest. Fight? The two accepted happily. But they quickly detected something was wrong. Both Xing Lianer and Xiao Mo Gu did not use Shen power no matter what happened. It would have been okay if that was just it. Those that were in Fanshu did not lack patience. The two quickly changed their strategy and started to drag out the fights. After you finish using your Mo skills, I don't believe you won't use Shen power. Consequently, a tragedy occurred. After fighting for an hour, and seeing Xiao Mo Gu's 10 Crow celestial apparatus showed signs of fatigue, the two were slightly tired but they were filled with joy. Boy! You're done. Shen power, let it out. Then Little Mo Gu showed them 2 rows of his snowy white teeth. Yao Arts. From Little Yao Arts to Little Thousand Leaf Hands, to the archaic wasteland sacrificial art. He seemed to fire off fireworks that dazzled the duo. He even brought out his half-learned, South Sky Arrow art, and, Grey Scar art, for a spin. The two suddenly seemed to remember that the sex dossier on Xiao Mo Gu had said this guy knew some Yao arts. However, was this really considered only knowing some? The two were unprepared. Zhua Mo took advantage of this rare moment and he outperformed himself. He continued for several hours until he used almost all the Yao arts he knew before he stopped. Even though the two were Fanshu, they had started to pant. Dai Tao wiped the sweat off his forehead and said breathily, "Keep him here, we cannot let him escape, otherwise, all that effort would be for nothing." Ji Zheng's breathing was heavy. He was intending to nod when Xiao Mo Gu unexpectedly charged again. The two forced themselves to be alert and was filled with anticipation. Shen power. Was it about to start? Zhua Mo threw out a handful of Yin fire beads and then it was followed by a dozen, sky glass wave, then sound-typed spells that came like the rain. The two were completely stunned. Then Xiao Mo Gu drew a flying sword from somewhere and started to perform sword scriptures. Holy, there was also sword essence. Ji Zheng and Dai Tao were completely stupefied. Their eyes were dazed and unfocused. They could understand him knowing Yao arts. In the minds of Shouja, Yao and Mo were one and the same. It was not strange for Mo to know Yao arts. But when did Mo know Shouja spells? From Diana Xiu to Seal Xiu to Sword Xiu, and even more exaggerated, sword essence. A pure sword essence. Are you a spy from Kunlun? At the start, Sui Mo had been slightly rusty and clumsy. It had been too long since he used a flying sword. But he quickly familiarized himself and the, now, unfamiliar sword scriptures he had used floated into his mind. With Sui Mo's present knowledge and experience, of course it was different when he thought of these spells again. The power of Li Water Sword Scripture skyrocketed. On a high, Sui Mo forgot himself. At the start, he still followed the moves, and then he started to move as he pleased. Li Water Sword Scripture was just a third-grade sword scripture, and no matter what, it could not threaten Fanshu. But as Sui Mo swung as he wished, it surpassed the limits of Li Water Sword Scripture. His sword essence changed and became even deeper. Yet no matter how Sui Mo transformed, his cultivation of sword scriptures was too shallow and he could not advance and comprehend much in a day. The pressure he could put on the duo was limited. He could not pose a real danger to Ji Zheng and Dai Tao, but they also could not threaten Sui Mo. The two felt this was a torture. They almost counted the seconds as they forced themselves to endure. As the power of Sui Mo's spells weakened, and his Ling power showed clear signs of being drained, the two almost cried from joy. Without needed to talk, the two went forward in preparing to keep Xiao Mo Gu here. If you don't use Shen power, what do you use? Little Mo Gu showed his snowy white teeth in a grin again. At the same time, he threw a sun seed into his mouth. A rush of Shen power circulated in his body. The Shen power quickly turned into the three powers. Before, it would take Sui Mo time to turn Shen power into the three powers, but as his understanding of Shen power had increased, this process became so brief it was almost instant. His three powers became full again. Little Mo Gu attacked again. Again. Li Xian'er finished looking at the paper crane that the sect had sent and great waves formed inside. Much of the content on the paper cranes was astounding. Li Xian'er could be said to have experienced much, but the contents of the paper crane still brought her great shock. At the end of the message, grandfather had used a very stern tone to tell her to take the people with her. She alone was responsible for catching Xiao Mo Gu and his group, at any cost. She had enough people. In order to protect her on this trip, grandfather had selected elite guards. While there were no Fanshu, there were many Yuanying. She knew the importance of this matter to Tian Huan, so she immediately made a decision. You have to leave. She was extremely shocked. He did not disguise the strong reluctance on his face. Yes, because of a very important matter. My apologies. Please bid farewell to Marshal D on my behalf. I thank Marshal Dis for his great hospitality these recent days. Li Xian'er's expression was sincere. Also, thank you to Big Brother Shi. Without Big Brother Shi taking this little sister to play, this little sister would have been unable to see much of the scenery. Big Brother Shi, if you have spare time in the future, remember to come visit Tian Huan, and this little sister will also have a chance to enjoy being the guide. She was disappointed, but he quickly recovered. A warm smile came back to his face. I will definitely visit in the future. Sister Xian'er, are you returning to Tian Huan? Li Xian'er shook her head. This matter is in the Mo territories. Zai's eyes lit up. Oh, Mo territories. Then this brother has to take responsibility. The present Mo territories are chaotic and unsafe. Sister Xian'er, give this one a chance to enjoy acting as protector. Zai's tone was half serious and half joking. Li Xian'er pondered this and then said with a wide smile, then this little sister will thank Big Brother she. As long as it doesn't disrupt Big Brother Zai's work. I don't have any work. She smiled and said. Seeing Li Xian'er was in a hurry, she did not dither. He reported this to Marshal D. Marshal D did not stop him and picked several experts to go along, which caused she great joy. Idiot. Lin Qian showed rare anger. His expression was dark. The disciples and the surroundings did not dare to breathe. Why did you act on your own rather than wait for orders from the sect? Lin Qian's tone was murderous and his eyes as sharp as a sword. And using such a stupid method. Do you not have brains? You startled him, stupid. The disciples trembled, especially the disciple that was responsible for the matters in the Mo territories now had an ashen face. It was the first time they had seen eldest Shixiang so angry. Eldest Shixiang was usually gentlemanly and warm to others, and almost never spoke heavily. This time, he was extremely angry. De Ling Feng's face was ashen white, her eyes filled with terror and hopelessness. She had originally wanted to return the sect to cry and ask for help. But who knew that when she returned, eldest Shixiang gave her a scolding. She looked dazedly at the eldest Shixiang she revered and couldn't believe her eyes. Lin Qian was unaffected by the terror and hopelessness in De Ling Feng's eyes. He said coldly, "Tell me everything that happened and do not hide anything." De Ling Feng trembled and narrated everything, even the message that Wei Sheng had told her to tell Lin Qian. Lin Qian asked about a few details but she was unable to answer them. After hearing this, Lin Qian did not speak and reached out to touch De Ling Feng's wrist. Moments later, he stood and ordered, "Send her to Han Shigu and ask Han Shigu to see if there are any solutions." At this time, De Ling Feng, who was on the verge of a breakdown, started to cry. The disciples and the surroundings all were sad. 2 disciples carried De Ling Feng away. Lin Qian looked around and said loudly, "I know that some of you think I was unsympathetic, but listen well. We must treat the orders of the sect with the utmost attention. I will pursue anyone that disobeys orders and acts on their own." The disciples all shook. Yes. After the disciples left, Xue Dong couldn't help but shake his head. Stupid to the utmost. Extremely stupid. This group is used to being arrogant. I hadn't thought that they would also be the same when they went out into the world. Did she think that she was in Kunlun realm? Lin Qian grimaced. It has been peaceful for too long. It is expected that the sect has become proud. That's true. Xue Dong clearly had no interest to discuss this matter deeply. He then asked, "You seem to be very wary of that Wei Sheng." "Not very, extremely wary." Lin Qian corrected seriously. Xue Dong was slightly surprised. "I really am interested in seeing this person you respect so much." Xiao Mo Gun Wei Sheng, 2 strong people have appeared. This world is more and more interesting. Lin Qian's expression was grave. Wei Sheng cannot be left alive. Xue Dong jumped in fright and asked in surprise. "You don't have to exaggerate. I have a feeling that if Wei Sheng does not die, he will become a great threat to our Kunlun." Lin Qian's eyes were murderous as he said, "I do not want to leave loose ends." Xue Dong sked. "It is a pity that there will be one less thing that I want to see. Because of you people, this world is becoming less interesting. Being bored is better than losing your life." Lin Qian glanced at Xue Dong and said. Chapter 676, Cunning Killing Move. Gongsun Cha looked at the battalion in the distance and smiled like usual. Beside him, the gazes of the other commanders were not as friendly and their expressions were murderous. Jiang Zhe. This name had become famed in the world. If this was any other person, they would be nervous and intimidated as though it was a great enemy. But Gongsun Cha did not feel very much. The only thought that Gongsun Cha could connect to Jiangzhou was Feng Yu's battalion, that Xian Kong battalion they had killed many battles ago. In his eyes, Xian Kong Temple had been their enemy since long ago. The difference of facing Feng Yu or Jiangzhou was not large. In any case, they were people he had to defeat. Even though he knew that the enemy would be hard to defeat, he was not nervous. Unlike other battle generals, his journey of growth was marred in blood and death, a cruel history of battle. Little Miss, who had created a path of survival with slaughter, had a steel will under that bashful appearance. There was only excitement. That excitement of being able to find the equal to fight with rippled through his body. In this fight, what kind of surprise will his opponent give him? In the eyes that were as clear as that of a neighbor's boy, eerie light that was called insanity flashed. The defense line that Jiangzhou had set up was almost perfect. While some places appeared rush, the entire defensive line had been established. Even the incomplete parts looked more like traps than openings. They did not affect the overall state at all. Of course, absolute perfection did not really exist in the world. Both Jiangzhou and Gongsun Cha knew this. Gongsun Cha knew his advantages and disadvantages. They had low manpower, but their mobility was high. Vermilion Bird Camp's equipment had always been the best of all those under Zhuo Mo's command. Jiangzhou had more people and a secure defense line, but the defense line was vast. This meant that their forces were spread thin and that Gongsun Cha had many places to target for an attack. Jiangzhou was strong, but the battle generals under him were likely less capable. How well they could follow Jiangzhou's plan was something that had to be tested. Also, Jiangzhou had a great disadvantage. They were fighting on enemy territory. The unfamiliar environment and the rebellious MO were all factors that were enough to be fatal. The hidden road to Cold Mountain Jia was just example of this. Gongsun Cha did not object to using the same advantage twice. He did not hurry to attack but started to search for guides that were familiar with the local terrain. Jiangzhou listened to the reports from his subordinates with an unchanging expression. Ever since the enemy had orchestrated the wave of attacks from the shadows, Jiangzhou knew that this fight would be harder than he had imagined. The mastermind had caught their greatest weakness, and it was a weakness that could not be avoided. If there was 10 more years, this weakness would not exist. But there was no maybes in war. He did not agree with the enmity Xian Kong Temple held towards the MO, but he did not have any power to speak against this. While he had status in the sect, his status was not enough for him to influence the decision of the sect on a question like this. What he could do was fulfill his duties. Send the order down, every battalion has to hold their position and not act without orders. Jiangzhou ordered without hesitation. Regardless of whether if the other was purposefully misleading them or if things were really as they appeared, Jiangzhou would not change because he had confidence in the defense line he had set up. When Jiangzhou had been setting up the defense line, many of Xian Kong Temple had opposed it. It was hard for them to accept acting defensively. What did the great Xian Kong Temple acting defensively against a little MO faction? While they had Bihan and Xin Battalion, Jiangzhou and the Jiangxi Battalion should still be stronger. But Jiangzhou still persisted in setting up a defense line. Fortunately, Jiangzhou had a reputation and status that was unrivaled here on the front line. No one would disobey his orders. While they did not understand, all of the battalions had complied with Jiangzhou's orders to the letter. Gongsun Cha publicly recruiting guides did not cause them any shock and panic. When planning this defense line, they had gone over the plans repeatedly. Any areas that could be problematic had been reinforced. They didn't miss any hidden places. They believed that this defense line did not have any weakness. This battle that attracted the attention of all did not begin with a fierce collision like people had expected and was slightly silent. Zhuo Mo repeatedly teased the two Fanshu experts. He was low, cunning, shameless and not polite in the slightest. After a few times, Ji Zheng and Dai Tao realized that the other had detected their intentions. The two discussed and then still continued to follow the three. But they had given up on their thoughts of comprehending Shen power through battle and were waiting for the reinforcements from the sect. Once the sect experts arrived, they would be enough to capture these three damned people at once. The two decided that if the trio landed in their hands, they would retaliate for this humiliation by giving these three the internal injuries. The same ones that they had almost suffered these past days, especially that thrice-damned Xiao Mo Gu. They did not focus on sparring and started to slack off on responding to Zhuo Mo's teasing. Yet what He didn't know was that Zhuo Mo had already started to scheme against them. Fanshu were terrifying, but two injured Fanshu, in the eyes of a toad like Zhuo Mo, were swans with broken wings. After teasing them repeatedly, he had gotten a general understanding of the two. Toads that did not want to eat swans were not good toads. A toad that would pass on a swan with broken wings was not a toad but an idiot. Zhuo Mo had been scheming inside all this time. If they could kill one, the other one would definitely flee. The danger would be resolved and Zhuo Mo was moved just thinking about the riches one Fanshu would have. Zhuo Mo's teasing was also intentional. He was like an experienced hunter repeating his actions that were not dangerous to numb the other. His plan had been successful up until now. Ji Zheng and Dai Tao were clearly not as wary as they had been. Just like usual, Zhuo Mo started his daily teasing. The one that responded to fight was Ji Zheng. However, he was not motivated as he had been a few days ago. Because he had been acting as a sparring partner in these recent days, his injuries had been suppressed but he hadn't recovered. Ji Zheng was just going along. As long as Xiao Mo Gu did not use Shen power, the other three powers were not of any danger to him. Would Xiao Mo Gu use Shen power? No. He had given up a long time ago. Once they fought, Ji Zheng's mind shook. His dull eyes suddenly lit up. Shen power. Having been tormented greatly, Ji Zheng almost cried from joy. The heavens had eyes. Overjoyed, Ji Zheng focused. He did not keep anything back. Changing from his slacking attitude, he attacked first. Shen power as expected. Xiao Mo Gu seemed to be fighting at full power and brimmed with Shen power. Ji Zheng did not feel fear and was overjoyed. He only paid attention to Xiao Mo Gu's powerful talisman. If Xiao Mo Gu would take out that powerful talisman, he would immediately move far away. He was wary of Zhuo Mo's little Mo treasure cup. Without the little Mo treasure cup, Xiao Mo Gu was just a tiger without claws and not a threat. The fighting was intense. One side had Fanshu cultivation. He was wounded but his movements were still imbued with power. The other side had domineering Shen power. While his cultivation was lower, but with the wondrously powerful Shen power, he was evenly matched to Ji Zheng. Dai Tao was both shocked and happy. He was shocked that Xiao Mo Gu had changed what he usually did. Was there something else going on? He was joyed because if Xiao Mo Gu used Shen power, then their previous plans could possibly succeed. But before he could think, an eerie figure flashed. Dai Tao was startled and got on his guard. A Gui. Dai Tao could recognize danger. This ugly woman had a strange Shen power and was also a target of the sect. Dai Tao's mind moved. If he could capture her. Xiao Mo Gu had a powerful talisman. Dai Tao did not feel he had any hopes of capturing him. This woman had a strange Shen power, but she did not show any powerful talismans. Dai Tao felt that he had some chance of success. His thoughts moving, he unhesitatingly moved towards her. The two immediately fell into a fierce fight. A Gui Shen power was eerie and hard to predict. Unfamiliar with this, Dai Tao almost suffered a great loss in the first clash, but using the 5-element manifestation wheel, he quickly steadied himself. As he became familiar with this strange Shen power, the power of the 5-element manifestation wheel started to show. He started to gain the advantage. At the beginning, Dai Tao kept a part of his attention focused on Xing Lianer, but as the battle progressed, he had to focus all his attention on facing a Gui. Otherwise, if he was the least bit careless, danger could appear. While a Guishan power was strange, he could still gain understanding from it. Ji Zheng had completely forgotten himself in the fight. After anticipating for so many days, he finally saw value in battle. The excitement and joy he felt could be imagined. His desire toward Shen power caused him to focus. He didn't even detect that a Gui and Dai Tao were fighting. His attention was focused on each of Zhuo Mo's blows. Every collision with Shen power would increase his understanding. How long has it been since he had a feeling of a new comprehension since he had stepped into Fanshu? He didn't remember. But this beautiful feeling was so intoxicating that he did not want to stop, and he forgot himself in the ecstasy. He wanted this battle to never end. Yet at this time, a feeling of extreme danger suddenly rose. In this moment, all the hairs on his body stood at end. A streak of silver light flew to his nose. He wasn't able to react at all. He could clearly feel the intimidating presence of that silver light. It was like a pin had pierced his nose and created pain. The silver light filled his vision. An extremely thin wound appeared on Ji Zheng's forehead. And then exploding lightning covered his entire head. Nearby, Tsing Lianer had the little Mo treasure cup. Her face was ashen, her body wavering, her Shen power used up. Chapter 677, Seeds of Conspiracy. Shui Yu was nervous. He had hunted beasts for a living since his youth and his mind had been trained, but at this moment, his heart could not help but beat furiously. He was many times as stronger than before, but this did not give him any assurances because what he faced was authority, intangible but powerful. Who are you? The guard looked warily at him. The fingers of the other guard were spread. If Shui Yu showed any enmity, he would be killed immediately on the spot. Shui Yu's experience was completely displayed. His furiously beating heart slowed. His expression appeared calm and reassured. He reached out a hand. I come from Silver Catalpa Cavern, this is the token, please report my arrival. The guard examined Shui Yu with a suspicious glance. The guard did not feel any untruth from Shui Yu's calm and delicate appearance. He took the token and inspected it. When he felt there was no danger, he nodded at Shui Yu. Wait here. Finishing, he turned and entered the hall. Shui Yu was extremely nervous. He knew that the so-called token was just faked and had been made from a piece of silver thread wood. While Darren's plan was intricate and detailed, there were too many places that were fantastical. Shui Yu did not doubt Darren. The blood summons could explain everything. He himself was one of the fantastical parts, specifically it was the vast power in his body and the sea of knowledge in his mind. The knowledge was vast and varied, including many ancient secrets. However, what it contained the most of were techniques used to interact with people. This was the wealth that the ancestors had left. The blood summon represented an enormous plan. This plan was so great that even he, having grown in power and knowledge, needed to spend a large amount of time to understand it. When he read the plan from beginning to end, he was completely won over by this daring and unorthodox plan. Large numbers of techniques used for scheming had been shoved into his mind. But compared to the plan laid out in front of him, those great tales of conspiracies were not worth a mention. A grandmaster schemer. This was definitely a plan made by a great schemer. This enormity of the plan exposed the great ambitions of the Darren that he served. He suddenly recalled how his grandfather had always liked to mention things like the past glory of the family. Maybe grandfather's wish could be realized. This thought flashed through Shui Yu's mind. An innately calm person, Shui Yu started to examine this plan in more detail. The more he studied, the more he felt that the great schemer in the shadows was unfathomable. He found that many parts of the plan were related to the knowledge that was provided to him. That grandmaster schemer clearly had considered every aspect. He repeatedly pondered every detail and memorized the entire plan. He speculated on all the accidents that could occur and how he should respond. Closing his eyes, Shui Yu tried to erase the nervousness inside. He told himself that with his present strength, even if a problem occurred, he could fight his way out. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes were once again completely calm. A while later, the guard jogged back with an expression that was more respectful. "Please come in, Darren is waiting in the main hall for you." The main hall meant the greatest of receptions. Shui Yu politely nodded in acknowledgement and followed the guard towards the main hall. It seemed that this MO general did have a connection to the Silver Catalpa cavern. Otherwise, he would not be so nervous. The Silver Catalpa cavern was an ancient inheritance ground. As time passed, there were very few that knew of it. Shui Yu had secretly investigated this MO general, but the information he had gathered was not clear. But in the plan, the MO skill the MO general practiced and even his daily habits were listed in detail. Shui Yu increasingly felt the great power of the Darren behind him. If he did not have great power, how could he do all this? Investigate this person. Hard at work, Wei threw a name over to Pu Yao. Unusually Pu Yao did not protest. He took a glance and turned to enter the 10-finger prison. Entering the 10-finger prison, Pu Yao familiarly entered the 10th prison with a few hops. The core of the 10-finger prison, the restricted lands of the elders. This was an area that was restricted to elders. The elders that were scattered across the major Yao Jia would come here to regularly meet and discuss all kinds of problems. The orders that decided the fate of all Yao would frequently be made here and then be sent to the major Yao Jia. Pu Yao seemed to not see the numerous and varied Jinji, he floated past them like a wisp of smoke. He quickly entered a black restricted area. The black restricted area was covered with terrifying Jinji. This was the location of the Intelligence Division, the Shadow Pavilion, that was under the direct command of the Council of Elders. There was an astounding amount of intelligence gathered here. Every day, the Shadow Pavilion members that were scattered all over would send the intelligence they thought was valuable to this place. The intelligence would then be filtered, categorized, and archived. Pu Yao strolled through the corridors as though he was wandering through his own backyard. He quickly sneaked into a storage. After taking a few glances, he quickly found the intelligence he needed. The dark pavilion had eyes everywhere. The intelligence here was not limited to the Yao but contained dossiers on the Mo and Xiuzha. Any person famous from the three races would have a file here. Without wasting any effort, Pu Yao found the intelligence he needed and disappeared. Returning to the Sea of Consciousness, he gave the intelligence he obtained to Wei. The two then had a heated discussion. This is too dangerous. But if we place our bets right, the profit would be unimaginable. Shui Yu's speculation about the mastermind was generally correct, but his only mistake was that the daring plan was not made by one but two grandmaster schemers. Fei Lei traveled over mountains and water. His face was weathered. There were more than 100 young people behind him dressed in worn clothing. In comparison to the others, his mission was much simpler. He received a list with some clans and their general living location. The mission the Blood Summon had given him was very simple. He was to find these clans and convince them to join him and form a battalion. The battalion's name would be the King's Horn. The name of this battalion caused Fei Lei's heart to beat wildly. Was the Darren who sent the Blood Summons a king? The King's Horn. Fei Lei was not as clever as Shui Yu, but he was a reliable person. The inheritance he received included Mo skills and knowledge on battle generals. He also had experience in training battalions, and this was why Pu Yao and Wei had given him this mission. He went searching based on the list, and the surprise he felt increased. He didn't know how the Darren behind him had found these clans. These clans all had terrible living conditions. Some of the clans only had 20 to 30 people left. After coming into contact with them, Fei Lei was even more astonished. All of these clans possessed a long history and had been great once upon a time. Fei Lei knew what this meant. Noble bloodlines. While these clans mostly had declined due to losing their MO skill inheritances, the blood that flowed within them had not changed. If they could find their MO skill inheritances, they could once again step onto the world stage. Thinking about this, Fei Lei's heart moved again because the blood summons had also given him countless MO skills inheritances. The King's Horn. Fei Lei's turned towards the young people that were dressed in varied attire. Some looked like beggars. He suddenly felt great anticipation. Under their dirty and young appearances, the awakening of the noble bloodlines. The King's Horn would blow away the dust of time, and the past glory of their bloodlines would come once again. What? You're crazy. Yu Qinglai's rebellious face was full of fury as he pointed at Pu Yao's nose and cursed. Ye just got out of the jail, and you want ye to go back. Ye tells you, ye won't do it. Just as he finished speaking, Yu Qinglai's body suddenly tightened and he was unable to move. Yu Qinglai strained his neck upwards and continued to curse loudly, if you have skill, kill ye. Don't think ye will go back to the jail. Kill you. An eerie light flashed across Pu Yao's bloody pupil. His thin blade-like lips curved slightly. How can I let you off so easily? You know, I have many ways that to make you unable to live and unable to die. Yu Qinglai stopped talking. He knew this. He had inherited all kinds of eerie Yao arts related to stealth, concealment, and assassination. Among these Yao arts were many torture methods that could make people beg for death. Even he could do them now. Pu Yao looked down at him coldly. Your personality is really not suited to moving in the dark. It is a pity that you are the only Yao left so the benefits fall to you. That's fine with me, but if you ruin my plan, I will take back what I have given you, with interest. Pu Yao's icy words caused Yu Qinglai to tremble. He knew what the interest was, his life. Having received the inheritance, he knew just how cruel and ruthless the people that moved in the darkness were. What's the benefit in going to a crappy place like jail? Yu Qinglai's throat felt dry. He retreated. You have to change your way of thinking. Pu Yao's bloody pupil was bottomless. He said in a slightly mocking tone, for a commander of the dark, jail is where talented individuals gather. There are con men, schemers, butchers, swindlers, cheats, each full of talent. Those are bad people. Yu Qinglai couldn't help but say. Are you a good person? You were also in jail. It is not important if they are good or bad. What is most important is that they are all enemies of the Council of Elders. Pu Yao's tone was cold. You better familiarize yourself with the rules of darkness as soon as possible. What I need is a commander of the darkness. If you cannot do it, I will switch to someone else. As regretful as the lost time would be, I lack patience. You want me to recruit them? Yu Qinglai was not stupid and quickly reacted. Recruit? Ha! Pu Yao seemed to have heard something humorous and laughed loudly. What's there to laugh at? Yu Qinglai was angry and embarrassed. Those people cannot be recruited. Pu Yao's bloody pupil narrowed and he looked at Yu Qinglai. He said meaningfully, this is a test for you, good luck. Finishing, Yu Qinglai felt his vision turn dark and he was forcibly ejected from the 10-finger prison. He just wanted to curse aloud when the door was suddenly kicked open. A group of people rushed in and forced him to the floor. Stay still. You have been captured. In Zhuo Mo's sea of consciousness, Pu Yao's expression was displeased. He murmured to himself, calling yourself ye in front of me, you don't want to live. He couldn't help but think of another person that frequently did this, but he was one who he could not do anything against. His displeasure increased. He immediately decided to increase the tasks related to Yu Qinglai's mission. Chapter 678, Nether Decay Reincarnation Lotus. Both Ji Zheng and Dai Tao hadn't thought that Zhuo Mo would secretly give the little Mo treasure cup to Tsing Lianer. While the little Mo treasure cup did not have as astounding of power in Tsing Lianer's hands as it did in Zhuo Mo's, it was still enough to deliver a fatal blow when Ji Zheng had let his guard down. If the news of this spread, little Mo treasure cup would be elevated into the top level of talismans in the world after this fight. The shock that Ji Zheng's death gave Xian Kong Temple was peerless. When they received the news, the elders of Xian Kong Temple were still on their way. They almost collectively lost the power of speech. Almost none of them believed that this was true. A Fanshu elder could die. Many elders had blank expressions when they heard the news. In their minds, Elder Ji Zheng was like a god. Many more elders started to waver. While the enemy was only 3 people, this mission had become more dangerous than it had been in the past. Of course, the one that had suffered the greatest blow was Dai Tao. He had lost all courage, turned and ran from the scene. This was an instinctive response. It could be seen from this how strong the terror he felt was. Ji Zheng's death surpassed Xian Kong Temple's expectations and caused the Xian Kong Temple elders to not know what to do. This was the first Fanshu Xia's death in nearly 20 years. Coincidentally, the most recent death of a marshal in 20 years in the Mo territories had also been caused by Zhuo Mo. This was also a Xian Kong Temple elder of the 4 great sections. News of Ji Zheng's death quickly spread to all the sects through all kinds of avenues and created a great wave. Some of the sects that had been yearning to join the fray quickly changed tactics and recalled the experts they had sent towards the Mo territories. While the loss of a Fanshu expert to a large sect like Xian Kong Temple was painful, it would not lead to their immediate collapse. But for sects outside the 4 great sects, this kind of loss was enough to wound them to the bone. And reality proved that Fanshu were not as powerful as people had imagined. They could also be killed. The Fanshu experts that had lived in luxury for a long time needed time to adjust to the chaotic world. The name of Xiao Mo Gu once again entered people's ears. However, this time, the name contained intimidation it did not have before. Killing a marshal might be a lucky circumstance, but if he killed a Fanshu as well then no one would doubt his strength. For Zhuo Mo, this risk had been a successful gamble. He had won. The gains this time were plentiful as he had expected. Ji Zheng was wealthy. While he did not have many talismans, there were rare materials that had Zhuo Mo's eyes lighting up. 17 incense fire ling wish beads. The incense fire ling wish beads were forged using a special method unique to Diana Xiu sections. The beads were formed by the power of incense fire. These 17 ling wish beads were translucent and pure. He didn't know how many years' worth of incense they had been treated with. Only a great sect like Xian Kong Temple could produce such high-level incense fire ling wish beads. The power of incense fire was similar to wish power. However, the beads were not used for cultivation. It was actually an extremely rare Diana material. Based on the number of beads, Zhuo Mo speculated that Ji Zheng had wanted to obtain 18 to make a bracelet. If this bracelet could be completed, it would be a top-tier talisman. Zhuo Mo did not understand the incense fire ling wish bead well. Each of the incense fire ling wish beads were given in tribute by the sects under Xian Kong Temple. Each bead had experienced 500 years of incense fire. The quality was high and rare. It was only because Ji Zheng had been waiting on the last one that he hadn't forged his talisman and his plans ended up benefiting Zhuo Mo. However, the forging of incense fire ling wish beads required special methods that Zhuo Mo was not suited to using. Zhuo Mo decided to leave them to Zhong Ru, who had wish power and making it more appropriate for him to forge these. It would be even better than talismans using ling power. The next treasure was more wondrous. There seemed to be a crimson-red lotus growing on top of a rotating black piece of wood. Nether's rotten reincarnation lotus. Pu Yao's exclamation sounded in Zhuo Mo's mind. Hearing Pu Yao's shout, Zhuo Mo became alert. Something that Pu Yao would exclaim about would not be an average treasure. He hurried to ask, "What lotus?" This is the Nether's rotten reincarnation lotus. Pu Yao repeated. His gaze was tightly locked on the tender lotus fire and his tone was filled with shock and wonder. The rumors say that there are organisms that grow in the 10,000 wasteland in the deepest reaches of the Nether realm. The reincarnation lotus is the most valuable material grown in the region. It uses the most corrosive poison as nutrients, and it gives birth to the purest and most miraculous thing. Sui Mo felt tempted hearing about it. Then what is the use in such a thing? Pu Yao smirked coldly and said, the best use for Diana Xiu is to preserve their mind during reincarnation. That old thieving baldy definitely planned to use it like that. Reincarnation. Sui Mo sighed. He was slightly disappointed. It meant that this could not be used now. You do not know the wonders of reincarnation. If someone knows that you possess such an object, your life is over. All those decrepit antiques will come make trouble for you. You can use it to trade for any talisman you want. You can have them do anything you want. Of course, they can also just kill you and steal the treasure. Sui Mo jumped in fright, it is that powerful. So this is that valuable. His mind started to move. He was considering what treasure he could trade with this. Pu Yao then said, it is not just for reincarnation. This is a rare object that Xiuzhe, Yao, and Mo can all use. Also. Sui Mo looked at Pu Yao that seemed reluctant to speak. And what? And it has a wondrous effect. Pu Yao glanced at Sui Mo, it can nurture the soul. It is the tiny bit of vitality that forms in place of extreme death and corrosion. Nothing can compare to its effects on nurturing the soul. Nurturing the soul. Sui Mo immediately stilled. Yes. Pu Yao closed his mouth. A smile slowly started to form on corner of Sui Mo's mouth and continue to grow. He was like a child that received his most beloved wish. Then this is something a Goe can use? Yes. Pu Yao said in a certain tone. While it is the first time I have seen this and I am not entirely sure what its effect are, it is something that will be of great help to a Goe. Great! Great! Sui Mo suddenly became excited. He suddenly thought of a problem and hurriedly asked, is there anything special method used to consume it? Just eat it, Pu Yao said. Sui Mo licked his lips. Suddenly, he felt nervous. He turned his face to look at a Goe. At this time, he was not in the mood to inspect his other gains. Those treasures that were worth 10,000 jingsha were not things that could hold his gaze at the moment. A Goe looked silently at him. Like usual, those wooden and grey pupils did not avoid Sui Mo's gaze. Sui Mo suddenly felt pain in his heart. That fragmented scene and this calm and wooden face flashed through his mind. He suddenly understood. He wasn't just doing this for an answer. With his left hand, he grabbed a Gui's hand tightly. He plucked the reincarnation lotus and moved it next to a Gui's lips. The reincarnation lotus turned into a green energy and burrowed into a Gui's mouth. Within his hand, a Gui's hand shook. Luo De was slightly nervous. Xiao Mo guest battalion had suddenly disappeared. Thinking to how Xiao Mo guest battalion had been publicly searching for guides previously, a thought uncontrollably rose in Luo Da's mind. Had they truly found a secret path? Originally, it was not his responsibility to worry about such matters. With Jiang Zhidaran in command of the entire situation, he just had to listen to orders. But the region in which Xiao Mo guest battalions had disappeared was very close to the defense line that he was in charge of. How could he not have his heart in the air? He had already sent the information to Jiang Zhidaran, but up until now, Jiang Zhidaran had just ordered him to continue to maintain his position. Out of caution, he sent out several groups of scouts. But the scouts seemed to disappear and not one had returned. Without any scouts and left ignorant of the situation outside, Luo De's worry increased. Other than battles of coincidence caused by outside factors, there would rarely be final battles where the main battalions on both sides would battle when a conflict first started. The two sides would test each other and it would usually start with groups of scouts. The fighting between battalion elites was much crueler and intense. Jiang Zhe did not hesitate in sending out large numbers of scouts. He needed intelligence, he needed to know Bihan's movements. It had been too long since he fought against Bihan. He did not know what kind of changes Bihan had gone through in this time. However, there was something else. The importance he placed on Bihan surpassed anyone else. Those elders in the sect all said that Bihan was dangerous, but no one understood how terrifying Bihan actually was, only Jiang Zhe did. He also knew of Bihan's hate for Xian Kong Temple. The two had competed from a young age and were evenly matched. However, Jiang Zhe had been allowed to take sole command of a battalion ever since the age of 10. Later on, he was allowed to form his own battalion, the Jiangze Battalion. On the other side, Bihan was forced to copy sutras in the desolate mountain valley. It was supposed to wear away his viciousness. In a break with convention, the sect leader had allowed him to take command of Sin Battalion, but it was only after Bihan had publicly fought him to a stalemate. In the eyes of other disciples, command of Sin Battalion was a punishment. Sin Battalion was famous, but no disciple was willing to be isolated, so, to interact all day with a group of silent and unresponsive puppets. Later, as Bihan's identity as a MO was made public, Jiang Zhe finally understood why the sect leader and others treated Bihan so poorly. But he also knew that Bihan's hate of Xian Kong Temple reached deep into his bones. Jiang Zhe decided that no matter what, he had to kill Bihan in this fight. He could not sit by and watch as a person as dangerous as Bihan become the greatest threat to Xian Kong Temple. 500 elite scouts appeared on front of Jiang Zhe. They formed 10 little teams. Jiang Zhe only had one order for them. Hunt the other scouts and kill them at any price. He knew that not many of these 500 would come back alive. Their expressions were calm and at ease. They did not feel any fear about the upcoming dangerous battles. They were truly elite. The fight between scouts meant that this battle that was fated to cause a great number of casualties had formally started. Chapter 679, A Gui. Time seemed to suddenly slow. In Zhuo Mo's eyes, the streak of light that was the nether decay reincarnation lotus was extremely slow. Bam bam bam, the sound of his heartbeat echoed in his ears. Zhuo Mo had never been as nervous as this. He watched a Gui closely. Suddenly, a Gui gave off purple light. The dark and strange Shen power suddenly exploded. Zhuo Mo's body shook and he reflexively grabbed a Gui's hand. His Shen power shook and deflected a Gui's Shen power. This movement was instinctive and did not come from his mind. The bright purple light entered Zhuo Mo's eyes and the scene in front of him changed. In an endless void. A young girl was sitting silently in the void. 7 purple chains covered her body, each with the thickness of an arm, and extended into the void. The young girl was dressed in a white and ethereal robe. There was no pain in her expression as she sat silently. Zhuo Mo's mind shook as he recognized her, a Gui. While it was the first time he saw that beautiful and unblemished face, Zhuo Mo still recognized a Gui at a glance. The black waterfall of hair fell to her shoulders, and her trimmed bangs gave her a hint of handsomeness. A delicate and beautiful face, long eyelashes, her face was slightly pale but there was no sorrow or pain. She sat silently and only her pursed lips made people feel her concentration and determination. Zhuo Mo seemed to be struck by lightning. That fragmented scene in his mind resurfaced, a figure sprinting while carrying him on her back immediately became clear. The panicked breathing of the young female and her rushed steps filled Zhuo Mo's mind. A Gui. This was a Gui. A Gui. A Gui. Zhuo Mo shouted with all his strength. The young female under the purple chains did not respond at all. It is useless, Wei said. Wei. What is this? What is this? Suemo in his panic had found a lifesaver and hurriedly asked Wei for help. A rare sorrowful expression came onto Wei's face. This is the undying Shen punishment. Undying Shen punishment? Suemo's body shook. For some reason, his heart hurt fiercely. The cruelest Shen punishment. Wei's tone was sorrowful. The mind and soul of the punished becomes the source of Shen power and creates undying Shen power. The undying Shen power will continue to corrode the body of the one being punished and cause their vitality to fade. In turn, the damaged body will create more Shen power the more it is injured, making it even stronger. It is a cruel punishment as the undying Shen power will tear the soul of the one punished from their body, and imprison it in the unconscious void. There, all 6 senses are sealed, there is no light, no sound, no smell, nothing. The soul will be left to endure in the unconscious void. Isolation is the greatest punishment. Suemo's mind rang out. He suddenly thought of the coldness and emptiness of the Shen power inside Agui's body. His body uncontrollably trembled, his limbs cold. Enormous pain twisted his heart. Undying Shen punishment. His voice was trembling, the fury and hate in his voice was unable to be disguised. Who was the motherfucker? Who dares to punish Agui? At the end of the shouting, his voice was a shriek. His anger exploded. The blood in his body ignited, and the burning pain tore at every inch of his skin. It is herself. Wei sighed lightly. It was as though a basin of cold water was poured over Suemo's head. He froze where he was. There are no flames of hate on her body. If she was unwilling, the endless void would create flames of hate. The flames of hate will not damage her soul but would cause her to feel endless pain. Wei looked at the young girl sitting silently in the middle of the chains and said with a sigh, the 7 purple chains are the undying Shen power. It was herself, it was herself. Suemo couldn't hear anything else. His mind was filled with these 3 words. The shadows of the forest, those 2 bare feet running in the mud, the trembling young shoulders of the girl, the determined and harsh breathing, the panicked shouts. Tears took over Suemo's vision. Bihan silently returned to the cave. Cold Mountain Jie was heavily guarded but because it was the rear, Bihan had found an opening. No one had thought that Bihan would sneak into such a heavily guarded Cold Mountain Jie. Due to that, the messenger seals of Cold Mountain Jie were not the special ciphered seals used at the front lines, but the messenger seals that were commonly used inside Xian Kong Temple. Bihan easily disguised himself as a Xian Kong Temple disciple without any effort and sneaked in. Familiar with the setup of Xian Kong Temple, Bihan quickly found the intelligence he needed. But the arrival of the Elder Court disrupted all of his setup. The members of the Elder Corps were all Yuanying and above, and almost all of them were at the peak of Yuanying. They might not understand how to work together like a battalion, but their combined strength was enough to destroy Sin battalions several times over. Fortunately, he learned that the Elder Corps had other matters to deal with and were just passing through. But out of consideration for safety, Bihan carefully retreated back to the cavern deep in the ground. He didn't even dare to venture out to scout for information for fear of being discovered. His disguises in front of those elders amounted to nothing. His furious fighting spirit cooled. Bihan and his Sin battalion waited for the arrival of spring like hibernating snakes. Cold Mountain Jie. The elders had received news that Elder Ji Zheng had died stopped their journey at Cold Mountain Jie. Ji Zheng's death was a fatal blow to their morale. What to do now became the biggest problem for Xian Kong Temple. Worry filled the faces of the elders. The present situation of Xian Kong Temple was not good. Of the 4 great sects, the one worst off was undoubtedly Shixian. Guliang Dao's betrayal had a larger effect on Shixian than their upper ranks had predicted. The situation had quickly become uncontrollable. Outsiders could only speculate about Guliang Dao, but among the Shi Xian disciples, everyone knew what the situation was. This had also caused the great majority of disciples to feel demotivated. Even a disciple who had won such great merit for the sect was treated this way, how could their hearts not feel cold? It was appropriate to describe Shi Xian as being abandoned by all close to it now. But the second worse off was undoubtedly Xian Kong Temple. Bihan was not as famous as Shi Xian's Guliang Dao, but his escape still caused people's hearts to move. But because there was still the outstanding Jiangzhe, people's hearts were moved but nothing else did. But now Ji Zheng's death was a heavy blow to Xian Kong Temple. The worth of a Fanshu expert could not be calculated in Jingshi. Xian Kong Temple was on a dangerous cliff. If Jiangzhe won this battle, they might be able to overcome this obstacle, but if Jiangzhe lost, the elders did not dare to imagine what would happen. The grim situation caused the elders of Xian Kong Temple to form two camps. One side thought that the elders should help Jiangzhe first achieve victory, as a loss would shake the very foundation of Xian Kong Temple. The other camp wanted to kill Xiao Mo Gu. The ones that were in support of killing Xiao Mo Gu had very good reasons to do so. They thought that, by killing Xiao Mo Gu, it would get revenge for Elder Ji Zheng and also re-establish Xian Kong Temple's authority. The Shen power inheritance that they would obtain would allow Xian Kong Temple an opportunity to develop again. Most importantly, they were ahead of the other three sects in this mission and the probability of success was very high. They could accept some losses. If they passed on such a good opportunity, it would not appear again. They were full of confidence in Jiangzhe. Jiangzhe was going to fight a defensive battle and he had the advantage of numbers. Would Jiangzhe lose? That was worrying too much. The arguing was intense. The elders in this corps made up almost half of the elders of Xian Kong Temple, and was the most powerful battle force in Xian Kong Temple. Their choices would directly determine Xian Kong Temple's direction. Everyone knew that they must make a decision quickly, regardless of what it was. The end result was a compromise. The elder corps would leave 10 elders to help Jiangzhe and guarantee the victory in this fight. The remaining elders would continue to pursue Xiao Mo Gu. Dots of light suddenly appeared in the void. They were like snowflakes that were attracted towards a Gui, who was imprisoned in the purple chains. They flew towards a Gui and then into her body. The Nether Decay Reincarnation Lotus. In his sorrow, Zuo suddenly saw this and hope rose inside. Pu Yao had praised the Nether Decay Reincarnation Lotus to the heavens. Zuo had high hopes for it. Thinking about what a Gui had suffered, Zuo felt extremely uncomfortable and wanted to smash the chains to pieces. The silent Agui seemed to detect the change. She suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes. Zuo could not describe his feeling when he saw those clear eyes. It was like the most precious treasure in the world being unveiled in front of him. Under the purple chains, Agui suddenly stood up. She focused on the dots of light appearing out of the void in front of her. She raised her hand, palm up, and watched as the light merged into her palm. There were threads of pure vitality contained in the threads of coolness. A flush of color returned to her pale face. That pure vitality nurtured her soul. She knew that her body had found young master. Before swearing the undying Shen punishment, she had left the tiniest bit of her consciousness. That tiny consciousness formed the deepest instinct of her body. Find the young master. The unconscious void sealed everything, but a few years ago, she suddenly had a feeling. At that time, she knew, her body had found young master. From then on, her heart had settled. The unconscious void which sealed off everything did not seem to be such a hardship. In these years, the only thing she did was use her soul to nurture the undying Shen power. This was the only way she could help young master. Her expended soul was quickly recovering. Young master. She suddenly stood. That pair of clearly eyes searched in the darkness. Even though she could not see anything. Chapter 680, The competitive pair in the surrounding area. Several Xian Kong temple scouts were roaming around. They warily searched for traces of enemies. Can we act now? The orange-haired Yao turned as he asked Shu Long, shut up. A Wen hissed out from between his teeth. He glared angrily at the orange-haired Yao. This idiot actually spoke at this time. He was really untrained. Shu Long looked with slight helplessness at the pleading orange-haired Yao. He shook his head and said quietly, wait a bit longer. Still waiting. The orange-haired Yao muttered with a twist to his mouth. Shu Long said patiently, they have not entered our range of attack. This is not advantageous for our ambush. The orange-haired Yao completely disregarded A Wen's disdainful look. He said with puzzlement, why do we need to ambush them? A Wen really could not stop himself. Idiot, it is easier to win in an ambush. The orange-haired Yao oohed and realized. Ah, I understand. You are afraid you won't win. You won't win. A Wen exploded like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. If you can win, then why use an ambush? The orange-haired Yao looked strangely at A Wen with an expression of, you are so weird. What do you know? This is tactics. A Wen felt faint from his anger with the orange-haired Yao. You are just afraid you won't win. The orange-haired Yao said in an assured tone. He looked sideways at A Wen. When A Wen met the orange-haired Yao's strange gaze, blood rushed to his head. Come on then, let's fight. The people in the surroundings looked at the two fools acting up at this time. The orange-haired Yao shook his head furiously. Seem you're afraid. A Wen's expression was disdainful. The orange-haired Yao shook his head again. I will not fight against people that are afraid they can't beat the enemy. A Wen was furious. You. Shu Long felt exasperated. He decided that he wouldn't lead any team with these two again. Looking at the scouts, it was clear they had noticed the noises and were moving in this direction. Shu Long said helplessly, then fight. Yes, with a genius like me here, there is no need for an ambush. The orange-haired Yao was smug. He charged first at the scouts. Idiot. The furious A Wen gritted his teeth. He shot out like an arrow. The two charged, flying at the front like angry arrows. The other people saw this and also charged out. The scouts of Xian Kong Temple were the elite members of each battalion. They were strictly trained from childhood and had rich battle experience. This group had worked together for more than 5 years and had great teamwork. They did not panic and quickly formed a battle formation. The chanting of Diana Xiao caused lights to appear on their bodies. The dazzling sutra characters spun around their bodies. Their expressions were calm and at ease. The leader of the team looked at the enemy charging at them and a hint of dismissiveness flashed through his eyes. They were experienced, he had great battle training and quickly judged the enemy. While they looked to have a ferocious aura, they were not in sync and their teamwork was terrible. Was this Bihan's team? The leader felt relieved. It had to be said that while Bihan was not famous outside of the sect, but everyone in Xian Kong Temple knew of him and the famous Sin Battalion. It was like there was a rock on their chests, so heavy they could not breathe. Bihan was a battle general on the same level as Jiang Zhe. This group that was charging over was not Sin Battalion. They were probably Bihan's cannon fodder. He suddenly recalled there was another battle general with Bihan called Gongsun something. He did not remember the name of that person clearly. He did not remember most people's names, but that was of no significance to the leader. The distance between them decreased. The leader shouted, Anamita. The lights on their bodies spun rapidly and a strange power formed. The orange-haired Yao and A Wen felt countless lights collapse towards the center of the enemy formation, spinning and forming a multicolored whirlpool. The whirlpool created a strong force that pulled them to fly towards the whirlpool. Whoa whoa whoa, what is that? I've never seen it before. Fireworks. It really is pretty. You have some skill. It is a pity that you encountered this genius, let this genius show you what is the truth of battle. He furiously sprouted words and his orange fire-like hair flowed in the wind. Shut up. You idiot. Nearby, Owen could not stop himself from cursing. The orange-haired Yao turned his face to Owen and said seriously, you will never be able to understand the thoughts of geniuses. This is why you cannot become a genius. He turned away after saying this and he smugly said towards the Xian Kong Temple Xiuzhe. Mortals, tremble. Shut up. Tendons bulged in Owen's forehead and his expression became more vicious. The two argued but their actions were also extremely fast. A layer of faint white flame floated out of the orange-haired Yao's body. The color of the flames was very light, almost transparent. His expression was exaggerated, waving, his arms spread apart as his mouth moved constantly. There was a layer of black fire around Owen's body that was as black as ink. It pulsed at an unique rhythm. This layer of black flame was thicker and deeper than the killing essence he previously had. It did not have any presence as though it was harmless. The genius attack, the genius invincible body fire bullet. The orange-haired Yao shot forward like a cannonball with his white flames, a long tail of fire streaking behind him as he charged towards the enemy's formation. Kill! Owen suddenly shouted and stabbed with his spear. His movements were smooth and filled with beauty. The black flames on his body suddenly flowed into the black spear. A silent black energy formed at the tip of the spear and entered the middle of the whirlpool. Stupid! The leader sneered. It was too idiotic for the two to think they could defeat the formation. But his smile quickly froze on his face. Boom! All of the Dhyana Shio shook. All the lights and sutra characters on their bodies were shattered and turned to dots of light. How was it possible? The leader paled. The battle formation had been defeated. The two enemy opponents had directly defeated their battle formation. Were the two yuanying? But at this time, there was no time for him to think. His instinct formed from many years of battle allowed him to counterattack the situation quickly. With an angry howl, a sutra character appeared on his forehead. His expression was stern and dignified as his palms pressed together and then pushed forward. Golden palm prints left his hand and immediately turned into two enormous golden hands that slammed towards the two people in the air. The two hands became bigger and bigger until they covered the orange-haired Yao and Owen. Imposing light palm. The sutra character at his forehead glowing even brighter, but his brow became dotted with gray and white. Leader, a Xian Kong temple scout called in grief. The imposing light palm was a skill beyond the leader's ability. This attack was forcefully used by expending at least 10 years of his life force. The other scouts all showed sorrow but they knew that this was not the time to grieve. No matter what, they could not waste leader's sacrifice. All kinds of fist energy, staff shadows, talismans, sutra characters erupted like a volcano. Their gazes were locked on Shu Long and the others behind the two enemies at the front. They had to keep Shu Long and the others from helping. Then they saw the remaining enemy scouts stop in unison without any intentions of forcing their way forward. Some of those with quicker reactions couldn't help but feel strange. But then they were full of disdain. As expected, these were untrained troops. When their teammates needed reinforcements, they didn't even have the bravery to charge forward. It was a pity that leader had. Imposing light palm was one of the ultimate skills of Dhyana Shio. It was extremely powerful but also demanded highly of the user's cultivation. Only those in yuanying could correctly perform it. Leader was a Jindan and had used his lifespan to do so. Everyone believed that the two would not be able to escape. The lights in the sky were dim in comparison to the two enormous hands. Bam! The two hands in the air seemed to pop like bubbles and turned into dots of light. The orange-haired Yao's expression was dazed. He was slightly dizzy. The transparent flames around his body were slightly dimmer as he murmured unconsciously, slightly dizzy. Wen's complexion was slightly pale and there were some wounds on his body. However, his glacial stare was murderous as he stared at the Xian Kong Temple team leader. Almost all of the Xian Kong Temple scouts were stunned in this moment. The two were unharmed. Xu Long and the others did not have any intentions of going forward. I just knew it would be like this, Ming Ju Zi said with a helpless expression. It's great. We can relax. Song Zhe twisted his mouth. It is not very good. Nan Yu had wanted to practice her Yao arts. Listening to the words of the people around him, Xu Long's decision to lead a different team was reinforced. At this time, the yells of the orange-haired Yao rang out over the entire battlefield. Hey hey hey, don't steal what's mine. Answering him was Wen's angry shout. Kill. 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 Mine. 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 Nan Yu and the others started to chat on the side. Who's going to win this time? Ming Ju Zi glanced and then asked. Tai. Song Zhe answered without even looking. Tai. Nan Yu looked towards the battlefield in admiration of the two's fighting. Tai. The Black Smoke Yao's voice came out of the black smoke. Ming Ju Zi sighed. I also feel it is a tie. However, don't you feel this is boring? Everyone exchanged looks. Switch teams, Song Zhe said. Switch teams. Nan Yu had an expression of agreement. Switch teams. The Black Smoke Yao's depressed voice came from the black smoke. Xu Long, who had been silent at the side, could not resist. Switch teams. Everyone's tone was crisp, but they couldn't help but show some admiration in their eyes. The orange-haired Yao and Wen were outstanding. After the two of them started to cultivate Shen power, they had progressed so quickly it was astounding. No matter what the two were doing, they competed. Since a few battles ago, there had been no chance for the others to fight when they encountered small scouting teams like this one. The two of them took over the entire battle and there was no chance of anyone else to attack. The two's powers had started to become difficult for the others to understand. Both the orange-haired Yao's translucent flame and Wen's midnight black flame were both unfamiliar and strange powers in the eyes of everyone else. They were completely different than the three powers and was slightly similar to Darren. While they admired the two, their fighting spirit also increased. Everyone hoped to refine their strength through battle, not to be bystanders. A battle like this was only a small corner of the entire battlefield. The fighting in other areas was even more intense. The intensity of the battle was not outside of Jiang Zhe's expectations. What surprised him was that, in such intense fighting, they were the ones losing. Chapter 681, Zhuo Mo's transformation. Sitting on the rock, Zhuo Mo was expressionless and his eyes were vacant. He stared off into the distance as a Gui sat silently by his side. Tseng Lianer did not know what had happened, but she had once shared those fragmented memories with Zhuo Mo, but she could guess after watching Zhuo Mo feed a Gui the Nether Decay reincarnation lotus. She did not make a sound. Zhuo Mo had been like this for 3 days. Over these 3 days, he did not move. It was as though he a wooden statue. In his sea of consciousness. How can I rescue a Gui? Zhuo Mo looked expressionlessly at Pu Yao and Wei. I don't know. The undying Shen punishment was the cruelest punishment in the ancient era. I have not heard of anyone ever breaking the Shen punishment. Wei sighed. At the side, Pu Yao was silent as well. Zhuo Mo became silent again. However, this time, he did not remain silent for long. He raised his face and a light flickered in his eyes, like a candle in raging winds, but refused to succumb. He murmured hoarsely to himself and the words echoed in his sea of consciousness. At its core, the undying Shen punishment is a kind of Shen power. Since it is Shen power, there definitely is a solution. If I cannot unlock it now, it is because I understand too little about it. My understanding of Shen power is too weak. As long as I continue to grow stronger, become strong enough, as long as my understanding of Shen power deepens, I can search for clues. I won't give up, I will never give up, I will definitely find the solution. Even if no one has broken it before, I will. The hoarse voice was not fierce, not spirited, not angry. Zhuomo's tone was indifferent, as though he was talking about something unimportant. But within the calm, each word was as stern and determined as it was being engraved into steel. The flames on Pu Yao's body suddenly exploded. The eerie flames reflected on his eerie face. His thin blade-like lips curved in an eerie smile. Such a difficult matter really makes one's blood boil. Oh, it is great to use this to pay rent. Wei's expression was solemn, but his eyes were as bright as stars. The truth of the gravestone armor is to protect. Wei cannot stand idly by and watch a Gui sacrifice. Zhuo looked at the duo. A warmth hard to voice flowed inside. The hundreds and thousands of words he felt turned into one word when they reached his mouth. A dot of light appeared in Zhuomo's unfocused eyes. His statue-like body suddenly shook. At the side, Tseng Lianer noticed immediately. The worry in her eyes decreased greatly and she unconsciously showed slight joy. Having refocused, Zhuo noticed the worry and concern in Tseng Lianer's eyes. He said, "I'm fine, do not worry." "That's good." Tseng Lianer sighed in relief. The intelligent Tseng Lianer perceptively detected the change in Zhuo. Zhuo turned his face and looked at a Gui beside him. His eyes became even more determined. "A Gui, I will definitely rescue you. No matter what." Over the next few days Tseng Lianer saw the rapid changes in Zhuomo's habits. Cultivation. Furious cultivation. Zhuo seemed to be possessed as he cultivated fanatically. He wasn't willing to waste even a speck of time. Tseng Lianer had never seen someone cultivate like this. Every time she wanted to urge him to rest, she swallowed her words when she met Zhuomo's steely gaze. Every bit of time was so valuable in Zhuomo's eyes. Every bit of waste time meant that a Gui had to endure more of that great torture. Zhuomo's heart hurt. Pu Yao seemed to have become a completely different person. He brought out all the Yao arts, spells and Mo skills he collected. Wei also brought out all kinds of ancient sacrificial methods. Most of the Shen power inheritances had been lost over time and it was hard to see the connections. However, the three major systems originated from Shen power. While each focused on different aspects, they were developed from the same source. Pu Yao and Wei thought of a method: reconstruction. Reconstruct Shen power from the three powers. This was a crude and stupid method, but it was a very plausible method, especially since Mo now had a large part of that great piece Mo steel text, which was one of the key points. Zhuomo's son Shen power cultivation was not low, but there were many details that were still unclear. This reconstruction process had clarified many of the details. But Mo felt that this wasn't enough. There were too many parts missing to this ancient power that made it hard to understand. What he studied wasn't limited to just Sun Shen power, but included even Greenvine Shen power. But the writing was from too long ago, and there was a great barrier between the people now and those ancient records. Zhuo was not skilled in the ancient writing. Fortunately, Wei was from an ancient tribe. Wei had been from final years of that era, as those ancient tribes declined, but he was still of great help to Zhuo. As the three of them worked together, some of the basic patterns of Shen power were clarified. The division of cultivation levels for Shen power was not as complex as the three powers and was much simpler. Celestial, Earth, Mortal, they represented the three levels of Shen power. In ancient times, all of the totem warriors were celestial level. They could move mountains, overturn seas, and destroy stars with their movements. For example, the sun crystal seed inside Zhuo Mo's body was something only those heaven-level totem warriors could seal. But as they organized, Zhuo Mo and the others also found some interesting things. According to this division of power, in Weiss era, those powerful totem warriors were earth level. The degradation of Shen power was evident in that era. The ancient era was undoubtedly the era that Shen power was strongest. Weiss era was at the end of the Shen power era. It was the time that Shen power was gradually being destroyed and the three powers started to replace Shen power as the mainstream. Why did Shen power degrade? Zhuo Mo suddenly thought of that suffocating sealed extinction battlefield. Was it that too many totem warriors had fallen in that great battle leading to the degradation of Shen power? And that mysterious Shi. Only now did Zhuo Mo start to understand the great power of the other. He probably had been a totem warrior. However, Zhuo Mo did not plan on wasting time on uncovering history. His time was so precious. Any drop of time had to be invested in becoming stronger. Zhuo Mo felt he had never had such a clear goal in life. Every drop of sweat would not fall for nothing. Zhuo Mo could clearly feel the Shen power in his body becoming stronger, especially after he had organized the knowledge of the two Shen techniques. His improvement with Shen power was clear, but it was clear he had just entered the preliminary stages of mortal level. The long and distant path did not scare Zhuo Mo, who now had a clear goal. Zhuo Mo's rapid improvement of Shen power slowed. This was to be expected. He had only cultivated Shen power for a short amount of time and he had not accumulated much. After organizing what he knew, he had understood many details and many of the places he had been stuck at had opened. His Shen power had increased due to this, but after this burst of improvement the growth of his Shen power could only improve through a process of accumulation. But Zhuo Mo was not satisfied. Fighting? Pu Yao's eyes flashed with surprise. Zhuo Mo never feared fighting before, but he was not one that liked fighting. It was rare for him to have a desire to fight. Zhuo Mo nodded. His expression was calm. Fighting can cause my progress to become faster. Weiss' brow creased slightly. It is very dangerous. As they sorted out Shen power and understood more, they knew that Shen power in mortal level was not of great advantage against the three powers in the later stages. Only when one stepped into earth level could they completely suppress the three powers in the later stages. In other words, with Zhuo Mo's present Shen power skill, his chances of victory against a Yuanying was high, but if he encountered a Fanshu it would be dangerous. A Gui Shen power was slightly stronger than Zhuo Mo and Xing Lianer was the weakest of the three. There will always be danger. Zhuo Mo's expression was calm but his expression was determined. But fighting will allow me to grow more quickly. Also, even though it is difficult for us to comprehend Shen power, why don't we search for comprehension in battle? Search for comprehension in battle. Pu Yao and Wei stilled. The three powers are different from Shen power, but they are all derived from Shen power at the core. That means then there must be patterns to the way the power is used. Rather than taking stabs in the dark like we are doing now, it would be better to search through battle. Since it is power, it would be more evident during battle. Zhuo Mo said seriously. Pu Yao and Wei had thoughtful expressions. Moments later, Wei nodded. Theoretically it is true, but too dangerous. Pu Yao smiled strangely. This method is interesting. Are you planning on using Xian Kong Temple? Zhuo Mo did not find it strange that Pu Yao could guess his thoughts. Spirit burned in his eyes. Of those two old thieving baldies, one is dead, the other is injured. Xian Kong Temple will not give up. I speculate that they will definitely send more people and they aren't far from here. Bihan said that Xian Kong Temple only has 2 Fanshu now. So the people that they have sent this time would be primarily Yuanying. We might have a chance. Pu Yao snickered darkly. They definitely will not expect that you dare to look for a fight. And, there is also an additional benefit. We can help relieve the pressure on Gongsun Shidi and Bihan. That is a good idea. Even Wei was persuaded by Zhuo Mo. Zhuo Mo told his idea to Tsing Lianer. His original intention was to urge Tsing Lianer to leave. Escalating this war with more battle was a dangerous course of action. In his view, Tsing Lianer did not have to accompany them in this. Tsing Lianer fluffed her hair. Her serene eyes did not avoid Zhuo Mo's gaze. I stay with you both. Zhuo Mo was shocked. So he had talked so much for nothing. What you say is true, it will be dangerous. However, the world knows that I cultivate Shen power. If I am alone, I will definitely be captured and forced to give up the Shen power inheritance. Father's power is not enough to protect me. Tsing Lianer looked at Zhuo Mo calmly and said. Zhuo Mo was stunned. Tsing Lianer was right. The fact that she cultivated Shen power was no longer a secret. There were countless pairs of eyes watching her. If she left, she most likely would immediately fall into the hands of someone else. Her only hope of survival was to stay with them to the end. Only by staying with Zhuo Mo could she reduce the number of people scheming for her Shen power inheritance. No matter how dangerous it was, she had no other choice. There wasn't any terror in Tsing Lianer's eyes. Her eyes were a deep unfathomable black that made it hard for people to guess her thoughts. If that's the case, then let's fight together. Zhuo Mo looked at her and said seriously. A thread of a smile blossomed at the corner of Tsing Lianer's mouth. It was like a beautiful flowering blossoming in the darkness. Chapter 682, God-killing blood sword. Wei Xing walked along the street as the people around him gazed on in awe. Wei Xing was famed in the Mo territories. Up until now, he had not lost once. There had been over 20 experts that had fallen to his sword. Many of them were famous and were lords of an area. After his successive victories, Wei Xing had become famous. He has started by challenging others but was now challenged by others. This change had only taken him a few months. The Mo did not have too much of a negative attitude towards Wei Xing. He was quiet, speaking few words, and determined. He also was not pretentious and was frugal. He was obsessed with the pursuit of power, and his passion and devotion to the sword was admirable. Also, he was an honest person. While he had defeated more than 20 experts, it was rare that people died by his sword. In the eyes of the proud Mo, Wei Xing had almost all the attributes that Mo revered. Even the Mo found it difficult to feel dislike for such a person. Many Mo sighed inside. It would be wonderful if such a person was born Mo. He was also so strong. Having defeated 20 general-level experts, many people speculated that he would not have a match below martial level. Would it really take a martial to beat him? However, many people felt that this was not interesting. Which martial did not have great power and authority? They were each busy fighting to expanding their holdings. Who had the free time to fight against a sword show? Maybe Wei Xing's strength was almost close to martial level, but even if it was just a sliver away, this kind of difference was unable to be crossed. The gazes of the leaders were mostly looking at the battle between Jiang Zhe and Xiao Mo Gu. In their view, an expert like Wei Xing was worthy of praise. But as long as he did not become a Fanshu, he would not have any true influence on the state of affairs. However, the results of Xiao Mo Gu's battle would directly affect the state of the world. If Xiao Mo Gu won, his reputation would grow, and he would become the first among the new generation of Mo generals. Additionally, the decline of Xian Kong Temple would not be able to be prevented. If Xian Kong Temple won, the Mo would suffer another loss on the battlefield. Jiang Zhe's reputation would grow, Xian Kong Temple would become even stronger, and Xiao Mo Gu would not have any place to hide. The attention this battle received was far greater than Wei Xing's matches. Wei Xing was not affected. These factors were never ones that he paid attention to. He stepped onto the battle stage like usual and waited for the arrival of his opponents. He sat down in lotus position with the black sword floating next to him. He did not know who his opponent today was. He had never searched for information on any of his opponents. That was meaningless for him. He was trying to refine his sword essence, and was not fighting to win. Pure victory was not of value to him. His mind was like a void and a little black sword was within it. If one looked closely, they would find that it was a miniature black sword. However, unlike the savagery and bloodthirst of the black sword, this little black sword had the beginnings of majesty. The sword was like the endless void. Vast, deep, and boundless. Void sword essence. His void sword essence had already surpassed any of Wukong's sword sect's forebearers, and reached an unprecedented height. The 6th grade sword scripture was transforming in his hands. Suddenly, the little black sword shook lightly. A faint, almost imperceptible, void sword essence rippled into the surroundings. Everything nearby appeared in Wei Xing's mind. Among the densely packed crowd, one person was extremely clear. This person was spying on him. The little black sword was connected to Wei Xing's mind. It seemed to detect something and shook urgently. Sword essence. This person was a sword xiu and also a Kunlun sword xiu. This person's eyes were filled with imperceptible enmity, but what caused the little black sword to react so was the faint Kunlun sword presence that he carried. It could not be detected with the naked eye, but in the void of the sword, it was eye-catching. Wei Xing knew long ago that Kunlun would not give up. But Kunlun probably had not expected that he would also not give up. Wei Xing suddenly opened his eyes. A harsh light flashed across his determined eyes. Since they had come, then they should not think of leaving. Wei Xing stood. The black sword seemed to respond and flashed into his hand. The mo below the stage were all astounded. It was the first time that they had seen Wei Xing perform any other actions before a fight. In the past matches, before the opponent came, Wei Xing would sit motionlessly like a rock with his eyes closed. What did he want to do? The mo all showed puzzled expressions. At this time, they heard Wei Xing's clear shout ring in their ears. Kunlun sword xiu, when did you become people that hide in the shadows? Wei Xing's black sword pointed towards the Kunlun sword xiu in the crowd. Kunlun sword xiu. The mo below the stage were astounded. The 2 words Kunlun had brought endless pain towards the mo in thousands of years. In the direction Wei Xing was pointing, people parted like the tide, revealing the Kunlun sword xiu among the crowd. His figure was average and so was his appearance. He did not show any differences compared to the average mo, and if he was a part of the crowd, he would quickly fade away. The Kunlun sword xiu did not move. Wei Xing's sword essence had locked onto him. I'm very curious how you found me. His voice was dry, hoarse, and ugly to hear. There wasn't any presence on him as though he was a normal person. However, his words confirmed his identity. My sword recognizes you. Wei Xing said coolly. Just as he finished speaking, the space between him and the Kunlun sword xiu had turned into a patch of endless void. They say that Wukong's sword sect had a 6th grade sword scripture called the Void Sword Scripture. I hadn't expected that you are able to elevate it. If your sect leader and Shishu heard of this in the grave, they would feel gratified. The Kunlun sword xiu smiled and said to himself. Wei Xing's body shook. His steely gaze gradually became pained. His grip on the black sword tightened, his knuckles turned white and trembled slightly. The endless void shook and showed signs of instability. There was a faint smile on the face of the Kunlun sword xiu. He slowly walked forward as though he was taking a stroll. It is a pity that you were not able to see them one last time. Even your fellow disciples ended up in the hands of mo and become their prisoners. It really causes one to feel pity that Wukong's sword sect was destroyed after existing for several hundred years. Wei Xing was silent. However, the blood in his face retreated as the other spoke. The Kunlun sword Xiu looked wryly at Wei Xing. In the intelligence report, Wei Xing had a resilient and hardy personality, but he cared greatly for his sect. This was his greatest weakness. Sword essence was eternal and could exist for thousands of lifetimes. Emotions were just common things. If one's sword essence was infected by their emotions, they would never be able to reach the peak. Such a pity for this good man. There was still a smile on the Kunlun sword Xiu's face. However, his eyes were filled with ice and emotionlessness. A transparent little sword that was as thin as a cicada's wings appeared in his hands. Just as he was about to act, he suddenly became alarmed. His icy eyes suddenly changed. In front of him, Wei Xing's presence suddenly changed. An ancient and desolate presence filled with deep grief flooded from the endless void and turned into threads that entered the black sword in his hand. The black sword suddenly hummed. It was like the howl of ancient wasteland beasts. The savagery and vicious presence filled the air. The thick tang of blood came from the sword and merged into the black void in the surroundings. Almost in a flash, the dark void became tinged with dark red. Wei Xing's body trembled violently. His face was ashen as though all the blood in his body had been drained. But his hand that held the black sword was like rock and didn't move a sliver. The Kunlun sword Xiu suddenly raised his head. He saw a mountainous blood-colored sword floating behind Wei Xing. Streams of blood dripped. The savage and bloody presence caused his sword heart to instinctively tremble. This was. Wei Xing's slightly red eyes became deep red, then dark red until they became black. The same deep black like the previous void. The killing essence and the tang of blood seemed to disappear. The enormous blood sword behind Wei Xing also disappeared as if it was just a mirage. However, the blood-tinged void in the surroundings informed people that the scene just now had not been an illusion. The Kunlun sword Xiu's mouth was wide as he looked behind Wei Xing. It was as though he had seen a ghost. God-killing blood sword, how is it possible? He murmured to himself with an ashen expression. Wei Xing's expression returned to normal. The black sword in his mind was completely red, and the surrounding void was also dyed red. In the void was a little tiny infant sitting in lotus position on the blood sword. It seemed to be similar to Wei Xing in features. Yuanying. At this time, he broke through to Yuanying. Wei Xing's sword essence level was always above his cultivation level. Even the MO that he had defeated Enver had thought that the person they faced was just a Jindan sword Xiu. Today, when he suddenly heard the terrible news about the sect leader and the Shishu, he had felt grief and fury. This caused a resonance with the black sword in his soul. The vast killing essence in the black sword had instantly broke through the barrier inside his body. Previously, he had had a bad feeling about the sect, but there had not been any actual news about the sect leader and the others. He had held some hope. But now that the other had confirmed his suspicions, in great grief Wei Xing lost the last restraints and calm that he had. The last barrier between him and the black sword was also broken. The long accumulation and the comprehensions he gained at the border of life and death allowed him to have a successful breakthrough. The Kunlun sword Xiu wanted Wei Xing's mind to show weakness, but he had never thought that this would become an opportunity for Wei Xing to break through. God-killing blood sword, so that is what you are called. Wei Xing lightly caressed the black sword in his hand and murmured to himself. The black sword felt the sorrow inside Wei Xing and the killing essence grew. It violently trembled, the sword producing threads of blood that ran along the blade. In a few moments, the sword was streaked with blood. The blood on the sword seemed to have an unique presence. If Sui Mo was here, he would instantly recognize this presence was Shen power. Pure Shen power. The threads of blood were the blood of totem warriors. The blood that the sword had drank tens of thousands of years ago. The Kunlun sword Xiu's mind finally cleared up, but his face became even paler. He was being completely suppressed by Wei Xing. The red void in the surroundings was like an enormous clamp that gripped him. Impossible. Even if it was the god-killing blood sword, it could not be so powerful. Was it? A terrifying thought flashed through his mind. At this time, Wei Xing raised his head. In this moment, the Kunlun sword Xiu, Wei Xing, and the red void in the surroundings had merged into one. As expected, he had a breakthrough. Master and the Shirshu in heaven, under my void sword domain, this disciple Wei Xing offers the blood of Kunlun as tribute. These were the last words that the Kunlun sword Xiu heard. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.